In the remote wilderness of Eagle Heights Reserve, Storm, a fiery red stallion with a violent past, has become notorious as the most dangerous rescue horse in Montana's history, attacking multiple handlers and nearly killing a veterinarian. Condemned to euthanasia after being deemed beyond rehabilitation, the stallion's fate seems sealed until a silent, traumatized 15-year-old girl named Emily unexpectedly approaches his paddock, ignoring all warnings and safety protocols. What happens next leaves everyone at the reserve speechless. As the girl and the deadly stallion lock eyes across the paddock, time seems to stand still in a moment that will forever alter both their destinies. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. The world shattered for Emily Carter on a single stormy afternoon. One minute she was laughing, racing across the Montana foothills on her beloved mare Whisper. The next, a blinding flash tore across the sky. The deafening crack of lightning striking a nearby pine sent Whisper into a panic. Emily felt the horse beneath her transform instantly from trusted companion to terrified animal, bucking violently before bolting toward the ridge's edge. Her final memory before hitting the ground was Whisper's scream as the horse plunged over the cliff, a sound that would haunt Emily's dreams, even as her waking hours became filled with silence. 9 months had passed since Emily last spoke a word. 9 months of therapists, specialists, and her parents' increasingly desperate attempts to reach her. But the girl who once couldn't stop talking about horses had retreated deep inside herself, locked behind walls of guilt and grief that no one could penetrate. "Emily, honey, please eat something." Margaret Carter pushed the plate of pancakes closer to her daughter, who sat staring blankly at the kitchen table. Margaret exchanged a worried glance with her husband David across the room. These silent breakfasts had become their routine, their daughter physically present but emotionally unreachable. Emily picked up her fork and mechanically cut a small piece of pancake. She knew she should feel something, gratitude for her mother's cooking or guilt for worrying her parents. But the emotion seemed locked behind a heavy door inside her chest, one she had no key for. The only things that slipped through were brief flashes of that day. The lightning, the terror in Whisper's eyes, the fall. "We're going on that tour of Eagle Heights Reserve today, remember?" her father said, his voice artificially bright. "They've got some incredible rescue horses. Thought you might enjoy seeing them." Emily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The Eagles Heights Wildlife and Horse Reserve was known for rehabilitating injured and traumatized horses. Before the accident, she would have been thrilled at the prospect of visiting. Now the thought of seeing horses again twisted something painful inside her chest. "Doctor, Winters thinks it might be good for you," her mother added gently. "Not to push you, but maybe being around horses again." Emily set down her fork and nodded once. She'd learned that small gestures of compliance made her parents less anxious. Besides, what difference did it make where she spent the day? The silence followed her everywhere. And here we have our main rehabilitation paddocks. The tour guide, a tall man named Marcus with sun-weathered skin, gestured toward a series of connected enclosures where several horses grazed peacefully. Most of our rescues come from abuse or neglect situations, but with proper care and training, they can make full recoveries. The small tour group, mostly families with young children, murmured appreciatively as a dappled gray mare approached the fence, nose extended curiously. Emily hung back, her parents hovering protectively on either side. She watched the children giggle as they tentatively reached out to stroke the horse's muzzle, their joy a distant memory she could barely recognize. "Will we see Storm today?" a boy about Emily's age asked eagerly. Marcus's expression shifted subtly. "No, I'm afraid Storm isn't part of our regular tour. He's in special containment. I read about him online," the boy persisted. "They say he's the most dangerous rescue horse in Montana history. Is it true he almost killed a vet?" Emily felt something stir inside her, the first flicker of curiosity she'd experienced in months. "Storm is a challenging case," Marcus admitted, his voice tightening. "And yes, he's had some violent episodes, but we prefer not to sensationalize." "Is he really going to be put down today?" the boy interrupted. A collective gasp went up from the group. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes suddenly focused. "That information wasn't supposed to be public," Marcus said tersely. "But yes, after extensive evaluation, our veterinary team and board have determined that Storm presents too great a risk to handlers and himself. The procedure is scheduled for this afternoon." He quickly moved the group along, changing the subject to the reserve's rehabilitation techniques. But Emily had stopped listening. Something about the horse's name, Storm, and his fate resonated within the frozen chambers of her heart. A horse deemed too dangerous, too traumatized to save. A horse who had hurt people. A horse scheduled to die today. While the tour continued down the path, Emily's eyes drifted to a cluster of structures set apart from the main complex, isolation paddocks surrounded by higher reinforced fencing. Something pulled her in that direction, a magnetism she couldn't explain. Her mother was deep in conversation with another parent. Her father had stepped away to take a phone call. No one noticed as Emily quietly slipped away from the group, her feet carrying her toward the isolation area as if drawn by an invisible thread. A staff-only sign was posted on the gate, but it stood slightly ajar. Emily slipped through, heart suddenly pounding in her chest, the strongest sensation she'd experienced since the accident. The path led to a reinforced enclosure set apart from all others. Beyond the double fencing, a flame-red stallion paced restlessly, muscles rippling beneath his gleaming coat. Even from a distance, Emily could see the scars marring his otherwise beautiful form, evidence of past abuse. But it was his eyes that captured her completely. Dark, intelligent, and filled with a pain so familiar it took her breath away. Those were the eyes she saw in her mirror every morning. Eyes that had witnessed horror, eyes that had given up. The stallion suddenly froze, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. He turned sharply, locking his gaze with hers across the distance. For 9 months, Emily had felt nothing but numbness and guilt. But in that moment, something electric passed between her and this condemned animal. A recognition that transcended words. Without conscious thought, she moved closer to the fence. "Hey, you can't be here!" a frantic voice called from behind her. Running footsteps approached, but Emily didn't turn. She couldn't break the connection with those eyes. The horse, Storm, snorted and pawed the ground, but he didn't charge or retreat. He stood watching her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her carefully constructed walls. "Get away from there! That horse is dangerous!" A reserve employee was rushing toward her, radio in hand. In the distance, Emily could hear more voices, the tour group's confused murmurs, her mother's panicked calls. Still, she didn't move. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in 9 months. She reached out her hand. Behind her, chaos erupted. Staff members came running, her parents' voices rising in panic. But before anyone could reach her, the massive red stallion, the horse everyone feared, did the impossible. He approached the fence. Slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving hers. "Emily! Emily!" Her father's voice tight with terror. The reserve staff had formed a line, moving cautiously toward her as if approaching a suicide jumper. But Emily felt no fear. For the first time since the accident, the fog in her mind was clearing. As Storm reached the fence, lowering his massive head toward her outstretched hand, Emily felt her lips part. "He's scared," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse, barely audible. "Like me." As her fingertips made contact with Storm's velvet muzzle, something broke open inside her, a dam crumbling after holding back an ocean. Tears streamed down her face as the stallion breathed softly against her palm, two broken souls reaching across the divide. Behind her, the adults had frozen in shock. Whether at her broken silence or at the gentle behavior of the notoriously violent horse, she couldn't tell. All Emily knew was that in this condemned animal's eyes, she had finally found someone who understood her pain. And somehow, in that understanding, she had found her voice again. What she didn't yet realize was that she had also just changed the course of both their fates. "Absolutely not, Doctor." Marissa Klein folded her arms across her chest, her white coat rustling with the movement. "I don't care what happened out there. That animal has injured 5 handlers and nearly killed Dr. Santos. The board's decision is final." 3 hours had passed since Emily's encounter with Storm. 3 hours of chaos, of medical checks, of her parents' tearful amazement at hearing her speak again, however briefly. Now they sat in the reserve's main administrative building, where an emergency meeting had been hastily convened. Emily sat rigid in her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The words were there now, bubbling up inside her like a spring thawing after winter, but she struggled to push them out. 9 months of silence had built walls not so easily torn down. A doctor. Klein, Marcus, the tour guide who was apparently also the reserve's head trainer, leaned forward. "I witnessed it myself. Storm's behavior was completely unprecedented. In 15 years of equine rehabilitation, I've never seen anything like it, Doctor." Klein shook her head. "One anomalous interaction doesn't negate months of documented aggression. The liability alone." "He's not dangerous," Emily interrupted, her voice still raspy but stronger than before. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. She swallowed hard against the tightness in her throat. "He's terrified, Doctor." Klein's expression softened slightly as she regarded the teenage girl. "Emily, I understand that you've formed a connection with Storm, and that's remarkable, especially given your own situation. But compassion shouldn't blind us to reality. Storm has injured multiple people." "So have I," Emily said quietly. Margaret Carter gasped softly, reaching for her daughter's hand. Emily hadn't spoken of the incident since it happened, of how she'd lashed out at the paramedics who tried to keep her from searching for Whisper, of how she'd physically fought the nurses at the hospital until they'd been forced to sedate her. "People hurt me before," Emily continued, the words coming easier now, "so I hurt them back. That's what Storm is doing." David Carter cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. "A doctor. Klein, our daughter hasn't spoken in 9 months. Not a single word since the accident. Then she meets this horse and suddenly," he gestured helplessly toward Emily. "I don't claim to understand it, but there's clearly something special happening here. Doctor." Klein pushed her glasses up her nose, visibly conflicted. "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, I sympathize with your situation, but my first responsibility is to the safety of my staff and the other animals in our care." "1 week," Marcus interjected. "Give us 1 week to see if Emily can continue to connect with Storm, under strict supervision with all possible safety measures in place." Emily found herself holding her breath as Dr. Klein considered the proposal. Something inside her had awakened during that moment at the fence, something vital she'd thought had died with Whisper. She couldn't lose it again. "Please," she said, the word barely above a whisper. "He needs someone who understands." Dr. Klein studied her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "Against my better judgment, 1 week. But at the first sign of aggression, we proceed with the original plan." She pointed a stern finger at Marcus. "And you're personally responsible for ensuring no one gets hurt." As the adults discussed logistics, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. 1 week might not seem like much, but it was a chance, for Storm and for her. "Are you sure about this, sweetheart?" Margaret hovered anxiously as Emily walked toward Storm's enclosure the following morning. They'd spent the night in a local hotel instead of driving back to their home in Billings, her parents unwilling to interrupt whatever breakthrough was occurring with their daughter. Emily nodded, her stride purposeful despite the butterfly sensation in her stomach. Marcus walked beside her, carrying a folding chair and a bag of equipment, while 2 other staff members followed at a distance with tranquilizer guns. A precaution Dr. Klein had insisted upon. "Remember what we discussed," Marcus said quietly. "No sudden movements. Always let him see your hands. And if I give the signal, you back away immediately. Understand?" Emily nodded again. Though words were returning to her, she still preferred the comfort of silence when possible. Storm's paddock had been modified overnight. A smaller, secure area had been created within the larger enclosure, a safe space where Emily could sit without entering Storm's territory directly. The stallion himself stood at the far end of the paddock, watching their approach with alert suspicion. "He's agitated today," one of the handlers murmured. "Probably all the unusual activity." Emily felt a flutter of doubt. What if yesterday had been a fluke? What if Storm had simply been confused or curious, and today he returned to his aggressive behavior? What if she couldn't help him after all? Marcus set up the folding chair in the secure area, then motioned for Emily to sit. Her parents and the reserve staff remained outside the outer fence, tense and watchful. Emily could feel their anxiety like static electricity in the air. Once seated, she focused entirely on Storm, tuning out everything else. The stallion hadn't moved, his muscles tense, ears flicking back and forth, signs she recognized from her years of riding lessons as wariness and fear. "Hey," she said softly, the word carrying across the stillness of the paddock. "Remember me?" Storm's ears pricked forward at the sound of her voice, his nostrils flaring. Emily remembered what her first riding instructor had taught her about horses, how they read emotions, how they mirrored the energy you brought to them. She closed her eyes briefly, focusing on slowing her breathing, on projecting calm despite her nervousness. When she opened her eyes again, she found Storm had taken several steps closer, his movement so silent she hadn't heard him approach. Outside the fence, she heard someone gasp, but she didn't break her concentration. "I lost my horse too," she said, keeping her voice gentle and even. "Her name was Whisper. She was beautiful like you." The words felt strange in her mouth after so much silence, but also right somehow. "She got scared during a storm. There was lightning." Storm tilted his head slightly as if listening. Another step closer. "I keep thinking I could have saved her," Emily continued, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "If I'd been stronger or braver or better," her voice cracked. "I've been so angry. At myself mostly, but also at everything. At the world for taking her from me." The stallion was now less than 15 feet away, closer than he had allowed any human to approach since his arrival at the reserve. His ears remained forward, focused intently on her words. "I think you're angry too," Emily whispered. "I think someone hurt you badly, and now you don't trust anyone." Storm snorted softly, pawing once at the ground. Emily slowly, deliberately extended her hand through the bars of the inner enclosure, palm up, not reaching, just offering. "It's scary to trust again," she said. "I know. Time seemed to stretch as they stayed like that, girl and horse, both damaged, both reaching tentatively toward connection. Then, with a grace that belied his massive size, Storm stepped forward and gently pressed his muzzle into her palm. Behind her, Emily heard the click of a camera phone and her mother's muffled sob, but she remained focused on the moment, on the warm breath against her skin, on the dark, intelligent eyes watching her with what seemed like curiosity now, instead of fear. "Good boy," she murmured, a genuine smile tugging at her lips for the first time in 9 months. "That's it. You're safe now." Storm blew out a soft breath, then did something that drew gasps from everyone watching. He lowered himself to the ground, folding his legs beneath him to lie on the earth, just on the other side of the bars from Emily, his head still close enough for her to touch. Is he submitting?" one of the handlers whispered incredulously. Marcus shook his head in amazement. "Not submitting. I think he's resting. I've never seen him relax like this around humans." Emily barely heard them. Something wordless was happening between her and Storm, a recognition, an understanding that transcended language. In the scarred, frightened animal she saw herself. And somehow in helping him feel safe, she was finding her own way back to wholeness. As morning turned to afternoon, Emily remained in the enclosure, sometimes talking softly to Storm, sometimes simply sitting in companionable silence. The stallion stayed near her, occasionally rising to pace the paddock before returning to rest by her side. By the time Marcus gently suggested they end the session for the day, something fundamental had shifted, not just for Storm, but for Emily as well. As she reluctantly rose to leave, promising the horse she would return tomorrow, she realized the heavy fog that had surrounded her mind for 9 months had begun to lift. Walking back toward her anxiously waiting parents, Emily finally found the words she hadn't been able to say since the accident. "I'd like to talk to Dr. Winters tomorrow," she told her mother, referring to her therapist. I think I'm ready to talk about what happened." Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. Over her mother's shoulder, Emily caught a glimpse of Storm watching her from the paddock, his fiery red coat glowing in the late afternoon sunlight. For the first time since losing Whisper, Emily felt something that resembled hope, fragile and tentative, but undeniably real. And somehow she knew Storm felt it too. What she couldn't know was that their journey together was just beginning, and that the true test of their unlikely bond still lay ahead. 3 days into Emily's work with Storm, rumors about the girl who could tame the untamable horse had spread throughout Eagle Heights Reserve and the surrounding communities. Staff members who had once given Storm's paddock a wide berth now found excuses to walk by during Emily's sessions, watching from a safe distance as the formerly violent stallion followed the quiet teenager around like an oversized puppy. "He's showing classic bonding behaviors, Doctor," Santos observed from beyond the fence, his arm still in a sling from his encounter with Storm 2 months earlier. Despite his injury, the veterinarian harbored no resentment toward the horse. "I've never seen anything like it, especially with an animal this traumatized." Emily, sitting cross-legged in the grass while Storm grazed nearby, only half listened to the adult's conversation. Her focus remained on the stallion, on the subtle shifts in his body language, the flick of his ears, the rhythm of his breathing. She was learning to read him as thoroughly as any book. "The physical wounds are healing well, Doctor," Santos continued, making notes on his tablet. "But the psychological trauma, that's harder to quantify." Emily stroked the patch of white on Storm's forehead, the only break in his fiery coat. "He doesn't like men in white coats," she said quietly. "Or anyone carrying anything that looks like a pole or a stick, Doctor." Santos exchanged glances with Marcus. "Signs of previous abuse consistent with what we suspected from his injuries when he was found." Emily nodded. Over the past few days, she'd developed theories about Storm's past, the way he flinched at certain movements, how he grew agitated around specific objects. "Someone beat him," she said, her voice hardening. "For a long time." The police report said he was discovered in an abandoned barn after neighbors reported hearing animal distress, Marcus explained. His previous owner was never identified. Emily felt a surge of protective anger. He wasn't always afraid. Someone made him this way. She looked up at the adults with sudden intensity. "Just like I wasn't always silent." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. In the 3 days since she'd begun speaking again, Emily had grown increasingly comfortable using her voice, especially when advocating for Storm. Her parents marveled at the transformation, though they worried her emotional state remained precariously tied to the horse's fate. "Doctor, Klein still has concerns," Marcus said carefully. "The board meets again on Friday to evaluate our progress." Emily's heart sank. Friday, 3 days away. The 1-week reprieve Doctor Klein had granted was half over, and despite Storm's dramatic improvement with her, he still showed signs of agitation around other staff members. What if, Emily began, then hesitated, an idea forming. What if we could show them he can be rehabilitated? Really show them? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Emily turned back to Storm, who had moved closer as if sensing her distress. The connection between them had strengthened with each passing day, a bond forged in shared trauma and mutual understanding. She thought of Whisper, of the trust they had built through countless hours of riding and care. I want to ride him, she said firmly. The reaction was immediate and emphatic. Absolutely not. Out of the question. Emily, be reasonable. Even her mother, who had been supportive of her work with Storm, shook her head vigorously. Honey, that's much too dangerous. Emily stroked Storm's neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his gleaming coat. He trusts me, and I trust him. It's not about trust, Dr. Santos interjected. Storm has shown no signs of accepting a rider. He's never been properly saddle-trained as far as we know, and given his history of abuse, attempting to ride him could trigger severe regression. Not to mention he could kill you if he panics, Marcus added bluntly. Emily stood her ground. If we don't prove he can be rehabilitated by Friday, they're going to put him down. You know that? An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. She was right, and they all knew it. Doctor, Klein had been clear. Either Storm showed significant progress in accepting human handling beyond just Emily, or the original decision would stand. There are other ways to demonstrate progress, her father suggested gently. Safer ways. Emily shook her head, a familiar stubborn set to her jaw that her parents hadn't seen since before the accident. Not in 3 days. Not enough to convince Dr. Klein. She looked directly at Marcus. You know I'm right. The head trainer ran a hand through his graying hair, visibly torn. Even if, and that's a massive if, we considered this, it would require extensive preparation. Safety protocols. Training for both you and Storm. Then let's start now, Emily pressed, sensing the first crack in their unified opposition. Today, Dr. Santos frowned. Marcus, you can't seriously be considering this. The liability alone would be covered by waivers, Emily's father interrupted, surprising everyone. All eyes turned to David Carter, who had been largely quiet during these sessions, content to watch his daughter's gradual re-emergence from her shell. David, Margaret gasped. You can't possibly agree with this. He held up a hand. I didn't say I agreed, but he looked at his daughter, standing confidently beside the massive stallion that had once been deemed too dangerous to approach. For 9 months, we watched our daughter disappear. Now she's fighting for something she believes in. I think we owe it to her to at least discuss the possibility. Emily felt a rush of gratitude toward her father, even as Marcus shook his head. Discussion is one thing. But Emily, you have to understand, Storm has never accepted a saddle, let alone a rider. Starting that process now, rushing it in 3 days, it's asking for disaster. Emily considered this, then glanced at Storm, who was watching the humans with alert interest. What if we don't use a saddle, she suggested, just a bareback pad at most. And we start with desensitization exercises, like you do with all the rescues. Marcus narrowed his eyes, studying her. You know about rehabilitation training? I've been reading the reserve's manuals every night, Emily admitted. And before, she swallowed hard. Before the accident, I was taking advanced riding and training classes. My instructor said I had a gift. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus sighed heavily. I'm probably going to regret this, but let's start with some basic groundwork exercises, just to see how he responds. No riding, no commitments beyond that. Agreed? Emily nodded eagerly, trying to contain her excitement. It wasn't full permission, but it was a start. Agreed. I want it on record that I oppose this, Doctor, Santos said firmly. Noted, Marcus replied dryly. Now, if we're really doing this, we need to establish some ground rules. As the adults discussed safety protocols, Emily turned back to Storm, placing her forehead gently against his. We can do this, she whispered. I know we can. Storm blew out a soft breath that ruffled her hair, his dark eyes seeming to hold a wisdom beyond human understanding. The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Under Marcus's watchful guidance, Emily began the slow process of introducing Storm to the concept of carrying weight on his back. They started with simple touch desensitization, running hands along his sides, over his withers, down his legs, areas where many abused horses were particularly sensitive. To everyone's surprise, Storm accepted Emily's touch with remarkable tolerance. When Marcus attempted the same movements, the stallion grew tense, but didn't strike out as he once would have. He's trying, Emily said proudly. He knows this is important. By late afternoon, they had progressed to draping a light blanket over Storm's back. The stallion fidgeted but remained calm with Emily at his head, speaking softly to him throughout the process. "This is actually impressive progress," Marcus admitted as they removed the blanket for the day. "But we're still miles away from anything resembling riding." Emily nodded, too tired to argue. The emotional and physical demands of the day had drained her. As she prepared to leave, promising Storm she would return early the next morning, a commotion at the main gate caught everyone's attention. A sleek black SUV had pulled up, and from it emerged the imposing figure of Dr. Klein, accompanied by a man Emily didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place at the rural reserve. "Who's that?" Emily asked Marcus, noticing how the trainer's expression had darkened. "Richard Hargrove," Marcus replied grimly, "chairman of the board and the reserve's biggest donor." They watched as Dr. Klein led Hargrove toward the administrative buildings, gesturing animatedly. "Is that bad news for Storm?" Emily asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Marcus's silence was answer enough. That evening, Emily sat with her parents in their hotel room, picking at her dinner without appetite. The appearance of the board chairman had cast a shadow over the day's progress, and she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out for Storm. "Marcus called while you were in the shower," her father said carefully. "Apparently there's been a development." Emily's head snapped up. "What kind of development?" Her parents exchanged one of those adult looks that always meant trouble. "Richard Hargrove has requested to observe your session with Storm tomorrow," her mother explained. "He's concerned about the direction of Storm's rehabilitation." "Concerned," Emily repeated flatly. "You mean he still wants to put Storm down?" Her father sighed. "Honey, it's complicated. The reserve depends on donors like Hargrove for funding. And from what Marcus said, Hargrove is particularly sensitive about safety issues. His niece was injured in a riding accident last year," her mother added. "He's been pushing for stricter protocols ever since." Emily pushed her plate away, appetite completely gone now. "So tomorrow is the real test, not Friday." "It seems that way," her father acknowledged. "Marcus wanted you to be prepared." Emily nodded slowly, her mind racing. One day. They had one day to convince Hargrove that Storm deserved to live, that he could be rehabilitated despite his violent past. "I need to call Dr. Winters," she said suddenly. Her parents looked startled. Emily had spoken with her therapist twice since arriving at Eagle Heights. Brief sessions focused primarily on her breakthrough with Storm, but she had avoided discussing her deeper trauma around Whisper's death. "Now?" her mother asked. "Oh, it's almost 8 o'clock. "It's important," Emily insisted. "Please." 20 minutes later, Emily sat alone on the hotel balcony, phone pressed to her ear. "What you're describing is a profound connection, Dr. Winters said after Emily explained the situation. "But Emily, I'm concerned about the pressure you're putting on yourself. Storm's fate isn't your responsibility." "Yes, it is," Emily countered. "I'm the only one he trusts, the only one who understands what he's been through, because you see your own trauma reflected in him," Dr. Winters suggested gently. Emily was silent for a moment, watching the stars emerge above the Montana landscape. "After Whisper died," she finally said, "everyone kept telling me it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have stopped it, that sometimes accidents just happen." "That's true, Doctor," Winters affirmed. "But that's not how it feels," Emily continued, her voice cracking. "It feels like I failed her, like I should have been better, stronger, smarter. And now with Storm, it's like I have a second chance, to not fail, to save someone this time." The line was quiet as Dr. Winters absorbed this. "Emily," she said eventually, "healing isn't about erasing the past or correcting it. It's about learning to carry it differently." "I know," Emily whispered, "but right now Storm needs me to be strong. He needs me not to fail him." "And what do you need, Doctor?" Winters asked. Emily watched a shooting star streak across the vast Montana sky. "I need to face my fear," she said quietly. "Tomorrow I'm going to ride again." Dawn broke clear and cold over Eagle Heights Reserve. Emily arrived early, determined to spend as much time with Storm as possible before Hargrove's visit. To her surprise, Marcus was already at the paddock, checking the perimeter fence. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked as she approached. Emily shook her head. "I've been thinking about today, about what we need to do." "We need to show progress," Marcus said. "Controlled, safe progress that demonstrates Storm is responding to rehabilitation." "We need to show more than that," Emily countered. "We need to show transformation." Before Marcus could respond, Storm appeared at the edge of the paddock, nickering softly at the sight of Emily. The greeting, a sound they had only heard him make in the past day, sent a warm surge through her chest. "Hey, big guy," she called, reaching the fence and extending her hand. Storm pressed his muzzle into her palm, blowing gently against her skin. "Ready for a big day?" As she entered the secure area of the paddock, Emily felt a strange calm settling over her. The anxiety that had plagued her through the sleepless night was receding, replaced by a clarity of purpose that reminded her of competitions before the accident. That focused state where nothing existed but her and her horse and the task before them. "I want to try something before the others arrive," she told Marcus, who was preparing the day's equipment. He looked up instantly wary. "Emily, not riding," she assured him. "Just a trust exercise." Marcus hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll be right here." Emily turned to Storm, who stood watching her with those intelligent dark eyes that seemed to understand far more than anyone gave him credit for. Slowly, deliberately, she walked to the gate that separated the secure area from Storm's main paddock, the barrier that had remained closed during all their previous sessions. "Emily," Marcus warned, tensing, "that's not part of the protocol." She placed her hand on the latch but didn't open it yet. "I need to show him I trust him completely. And I need him to trust me too. This isn't about you and Storm anymore," Marcus argued. "This is about convincing Hargrove and the board. Going off protocol now could jeopardize everything." Emily looked back at Storm, who had moved closer to the gate, his ears pricked forward curiously. "5 minutes," she pleaded. "Just 5 minutes on his side of the fence." "Please, Marcus." The trainer ran a hand through his hair, visibly conflicted. 2 minutes, he finally conceded. "And I'm coming in with the tranquilizer gun." "No guns," Emily said firmly. "He associates them with pain. It would undo everything." They stared at each other, locked in a battle of wills. Finally, Marcus cursed under his breath. 2 minutes? I'll have the emergency team on standby." Heart pounding, Emily turned back to the gate. As she lifted the latch, she thought of Whisper, of that terrible moment when trust had been broken by fear. Taking a deep breath, she swung the gate open and stepped for the first time into Storm's territory without barriers. The stallion stood motionless, watching her. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Emily was acutely aware of Marcus tensing behind her, of the morning birds falling silent, of her own pulse thundering in her ears. She took one step forward, then another, her eyes never leaving Storm's. "It's just me," she said softly. "Just Emily." Storm's nostrils flared as he took in her scent. His muscles rippled beneath his gleaming coat, power contained but not threatening. Slowly, deliberately, Emily raised her hand, not reaching for him but offering connection. "Your choice," she whispered. "Always your choice." For 3 endless seconds, Storm remained frozen. Then, with a grace that belied his massive size, he lowered his head and stepped forward, pressing his forehead against her outstretched palm. Emily heard Marcus exhale sharply behind her, but she remained focused entirely on the moment, on the warmth of Storm's skin beneath her hand, on the gentle rhythm of his breathing, on the profound trust implicit in his gesture. "Good boy," she murmured, running her fingers lightly up to stroke between his ears. "Such a good, brave boy." As if understanding the praise, Storm nudged her gently with his muzzle. Emily laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to surprise even her. Emboldened, she moved her hand to his neck, then his shoulder, maintaining contact as she slowly circled him, speaking softly all the while. Storm followed her movement with his head, turning to keep her in sight, but made no move to pull away or show aggression. By the time Emily returned to face him, tears were streaming down her cheeks, tears not of sorrow, but of overwhelming connection. "Time's up," Marcus called softly, clearly reluctant to break the moment but mindful of safety. Emily nodded, giving Storm a final pat before backing slowly toward the gate. The stallion followed her, stopping only when she had passed through to the secure area once more. As Marcus closed and latched the gate, Emily reached through the bars to stroke Storm's muzzle. "We did it," she whispered to the horse. "Now we just need to show the others." Marcus was shaking his head in amazement. "In 20 years of equine rehabilitation, I've never seen anything like that," he admitted. "The level of trust he's showing you, it's extraordinary." Emily smiled, wiping away her tears. "It's mutual," she said simply. Before Marcus could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention. "Doctor?" Klein's SUV had returned, followed by 2 other cars. "They're early," Marcus muttered, checking his watch with a frown. Emily felt a flutter of anxiety but pushed it down, turning back to Storm. "Ready to meet some new people?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. The stallion's ears flicked back momentarily, a sign of unease. "We'll go slow," she promised him. "I won't let anything bad happen." As if understanding, Storm blew out a soft breath and nudged her hand through the bars. "Emily!" her mother's voice called from the direction of the approaching group. "Here," she answered, not taking her eyes off Storm. "We're just getting started." Footsteps approached. Too many footsteps, she realized with growing apprehension. When she finally turned, she saw not just her parents and doctor, Klein, but Richard Hargrove, Dr. Santos, and several other people she didn't recognize, all wearing expressions ranging from curiosity to open skepticism. "Quite the audience," Marcus murmured, moving to stand beside her. "Stay calm. Storm will pick up on your anxiety if you let it show." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath to center herself. As the group reached the paddock fence, Dr. Klein made introductions. "Emily, this is Mr. Hargrove, chairman of our board," she said formally. "And these are Dr. Levine and Dr. Patterson, equine behavior specialists who have consulted on Storm's case previously." Emily nodded politely, though her attention remained divided between the newcomers and Storm, who had retreated a few steps at the arrival of so many strangers. "So, this is the miracle worker," Hargrove said, his tone making it clear he was far from convinced. He was taller up close, with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Doctor, Klein tells me you've made some progress with the animal." "His name is Storm," Emily replied, more sharply than she'd intended. "And yes, we've made a lot of progress." One of the specialists, Dr. Levine, a woman with closely cropped dark hair, stepped forward with interest. "We heard you were actually inside the paddock with him earlier." "Without barriers," Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside her. "That was an unscheduled assessment," he said diplomatically. "Part of our evaluation process." "Interesting," Dr. Levine remarked, studying Emily with new intensity. "And there was no aggressive behavior?" "None," Emily confirmed. "He's never been aggressive with me." "But he has with everyone else," Hargrove pointed out. "One isolated relationship, however remarkable, doesn't constitute rehabilitation." "Which is why we've been implementing a gradual socialization program," Marcus interjected smoothly. "Storm is already showing decreased reactivity to the presence of staff members." Emily sensed Storm growing increasingly tense as the group continued to observe and discuss him. His ears were flattening, his stance widening, warning signs she recognized all too well. "He doesn't like being stared at," she interrupted, stepping between the group and the fence. "Could everyone please back up a little? And maybe lower your voices, Doctor?" Klein frowned, but Dr. Levine nodded with professional interest. "The girl is right," she said. "Direct eye contact is often perceived as threatening by traumatized animals. Let's move back and observe more discreetly." As the group reluctantly retreated a few paces, Emily turned back to Storm, speaking softly to reassure him. To her relief, his posture gradually relaxed. "Remarkable, Doctor," Patterson murmured. "The level of communication there." "But still limited to one person," Hargrove persisted. "The question before us is whether this animal can ever be safely handled by anyone else, or whether he'll remain dangerous to everyone except Missy Carter." Emily felt a flare of determination. This was the moment, the challenge they needed to address. Turning back to the group, she made a decision. "He can learn to trust others," she said firmly. "I can show you." All eyes turned to her expectantly. "Marcus," she said, not looking away from Hargrove, "would you be willing to approach the fence with me? To show that Storm can accept others when properly introduced?" The head trainer hesitated only briefly before nodding. "We've been working on this," he confirmed for the group's benefit. "Small exposures, always with Emily present." As Marcus moved to stand beside her at the fence, Emily turned back to Storm, who had retreated several more steps, eyes wary. "It's okay," she called to him. "Marcus is a friend." "You know Marcus?" The stallion snorted, pawing nervously at the ground. "Take it slow," Emily advised Marcus quietly. "Let him come to us." For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Storm remained at a distance, alert and watchful. Emily continued to speak softly, reassuringly, while Marcus stood perfectly still beside her. "This isn't particularly convincing," Hargrove said, eventually checking his watch. "Patience is essential in rehabilitation," Dr. Levine countered. "The fact that the horse isn't showing aggression, even from a distance, represents progress." As if determined to prove Hargrove wrong, Storm suddenly took a step forward, then another. Emily felt her heart leap with hope. "Good boy," she encouraged. "That's it." Inch by cautious inch, Storm approached until he stood just beyond arm's reach of the fence. His focus remained primarily on Emily, but his eyes flicked occasionally to Marcus, wary but not panicked. "May I?" Marcus asked Emily quietly. She nodded, understanding his intention. "Storm," she said clearly, placing her hand on the fence. "This is Marcus. He's here to help us." Slowly, telegraphing his movements, Marcus placed his hand on the fence near Emily's, not reaching for the horse, just establishing presence. Storm's ears flicked back and forth, but he didn't retreat. "I've been with him almost daily," Marcus explained to the observers. Always keeping a safe distance until now, always associating my presence with positive experiences for him. And the result? Dr. I, Patterson prompted. In answer, Marcus carefully extended his hand through the fence, palm up, the universal gesture of peace to a horse. Emily held her breath, as did everyone watching. For a long moment, Storm remained motionless. Then, with deliberate caution, he stretched out his neck and briefly, so briefly it might have been missed in a blink, touched his muzzle to Marcus's hand before pulling back. It was the smallest of gestures, but in the context of Storm's history, it was monumental. "My God," Dr. Santos whispered. "He actually made contact." Emily wanted to cheer, to jump with excitement, but she kept her movements controlled for Storm's sake. "See?" she said, unable to keep the triumph from her voice as she turned to Hargrove. "He can learn to trust again." The board chairman's expression remained impassive, but Dr. Levine was nodding with professional appreciation. "Impressive progress, especially in such a short time frame. But still very limited," Hargrove countered. "One primary handler, one secondary with minimal contact. That's hardly a full rehabilitation." Emily felt frustration rising in her chest. What would it take to convince this man? She glanced at Storm, who had retreated to a comfortable distance again, then at the equipment Marcus had prepared for their session. The training halter, the soft lead rope, the bareback pad they had planned to introduce today. A wild idea formed in her mind. Reckless perhaps, but potentially decisive. "What if I could show you more?" she asked, her voice stronger than she felt. "What if I could show you that Storm isn't just tolerating humans, but actively working with them?" Hargrove raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you proposing?" Emily took a deep breath. "Let me work with him. Right now. Not just in the paddock, but with equipment, a halter, a lead rope. Let me show you what he's capable of." Marcus shot her a warning glance. "Emily, we had discussed a gradual introduction." "We don't have time for gradual," she interrupted, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "They're going to put him down if we don't convince them now." Their eyes locked in silent communication. Finally, Marcus gave a small nod. "Your call," he said quietly. "But we follow safety protocols." Turning back to the group, Emily squared her shoulders. "If you'll give us some space and time to work, I believe Storm can demonstrate significant progress today." "Doctor." Klein started to object, but Dr. Levine interjected with professional interest. "I'd like to see this," she said. "From a safe observational distance, of course." After a brief, tense discussion, it was agreed. The group would retreat to an observation area with a clear view of the paddock, while Emily and Marcus would work with Storm under careful supervision. As everyone moved into position, Emily's father caught her arm. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly, concern evident in his eyes. Emily thought of the previous night's conversation with Dr. Winters. Of her own words, "I need to face my fear." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I need to do this for Storm and for me." Her father studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Be careful," he said, squeezing her arm before joining her mother in the observation area. Once everyone was positioned, Emily turned back to Storm, who had been watching the proceedings with alert interest. "Time to show them who you really are," she murmured to the stallion. "Ready to work?" Storm's ears pricked forward at the change in her tone, a horse's universal sign of interest and attention. Taking a deep breath, Emily entered the secure area of the paddock, where Marcus was arranging the equipment they would need. "We'll start with basic groundwork," he said, handing her a soft training halter. "If, and only if he accepts that without resistance, we can consider more." Emily nodded, her confidence building. In her mind, she walked through the steps ahead, approaching, haltering, leading. Simple task for most horses, but for Storm, potentially triggering given his history of abuse. "I'll be right beside you," Marcus assured her, reading her expression. "Just like we practiced with the other rescues." With the halter in hand, Emily unlatched the inner gate once more and stepped into Storm's space. This time there was no hesitation in her movement, no fear, just purposeful calm. Storm watched her approach, head high but not alarmed. Emily spoke to him continuously in a low, confident voice, explaining each step as she moved closer. "I'm going to put this halter on you now," she told him, holding it up for him to see and smell. "Nothing scary, just a tool to help us communicate better." To her relief, Storm showed only mild curiosity as she carefully raised the halter toward his head. This was the critical moment, the point where many traumatized horses would panic, remembering past abuse associated with restraint. Emily moved slowly but decisively, slipping the noseband over his muzzle while maintaining eye contact. Storm tensed momentarily as the unfamiliar equipment touched him, but at Emily's soft encouragement, he remained still, allowing her to buckle the strap behind his ears. From the observation area, she heard murmurs of approval. Good boy, she praised, scratching his favorite spot between the ears. Perfect. Marcus approached cautiously, carrying the lead rope. Ready for the next step? Emily nodded, taking the rope and carefully attaching it to Storm's halter. The stallion shifted uneasily, tossing his head once, but settled when Emily stroked his neck. Now comes the real test, Marcus murmured. Remember, no sudden movements, no tension in the rope. If he resists, release immediately. Taking a deep breath, Emily applied the gentlest pressure to the lead rope, the universal signal for a horse to move forward. For a heart-stopping moment, Storm planted his feet, confusion evident in his eyes. It's okay, Emily assured him. We're just going to walk together, like we've been doing. But with this to help guide you? She applied pressure again, and this time, miracle of miracles, Storm took a tentative step forward. Emily moved with him, maintaining a position at his shoulder as they took one step, then another. That's it, she encouraged, feeling a surge of elation. Just like that. As they completed a small circle in the paddock, Emily glanced toward the observation area. Even from a distance, she could see the specialist's impressed expressions, and more importantly, the thoughtful frown that had replaced Hargrove's dismissive skepticism. Emboldened by their success, Emily guided Storm through several more basic exercises, stopping, turning, backing up. With each successful response, the stallion seemed to grow more confident, more engaged in the process. He's a quick learner, Marcus observed quietly. Once he understands you're not going to hurt him, he's eager to please. Emily nodded, a lump forming in her throat as she stroked Storm's gleaming neck. He just needed someone to believe in him. After 15 minutes of groundwork, Marcus signaled a pause. That's excellent progress, he said, loud enough for the observers to hear. We should end on this positive note. But Emily wasn't ready to stop. Not when they'd made such breakthrough progress. Not when Storm's future still hung in the balance. What about the bareback pad? She asked quietly. Marcus's expression turned serious. Emily, we've already demonstrated significant progress. Pushing further today might be risking too much. Or it might be exactly what we need to convince them, she countered, glancing meaningfully toward Hargrove, who was deep in conversation with Dr. Klein. Marcus followed her gaze, then sighed heavily. If, and this is a big if, Storm accepts the pad without resistance, that's as far as we go today. Agreed? Emily nodded, though in her heart she knew that if the opportunity presented itself, she would take it further. This was their chance, perhaps their only chance, to save Storm's life. As Marcus retrieved the simple bareback pad from the equipment pile, Emily continued to work with Storm, maintaining the connection they had established. The stallion remained attentive, responsive to her subtle cues and quiet voice. We're going to try something new, she told him as Marcus returned. Something that might feel strange at first, but it won't hurt. I promise. Marcus handed her the pad, a simple, lightweight design without stirrups, more like a thick blanket than a saddle. Remember, he said quietly, horses feel pressure and weight differently than humans do. Even this lightweight pad will feel significant to him. Emily nodded, careful to show the pad to Storm before making any move to place it on his back. The stallion sniffed it curiously, showing no immediate signs of distress. Good boy, she praised, beginning to stroke his back with her free hand, preparing him for the sensation to come. With Marcus standing at Storm's head, gently holding the lead rope, Emily carefully raised the pad. This was the moment of truth. Would Storm associate this object, this pressure, with past abuse? Would it trigger the fear-based aggression that had earned him his deadly reputation? Time seemed to slow as she gently placed the pad on his back. Storm flinched at the unfamiliar sensation, muscles tensing beneath the pad. Emily held her breath, ready to remove it at the first sign of panic. But instead of exploding into fear-driven violence, Storm merely turned his head to look at the strange object on his back, then at Emily, as if asking for explanation. It's okay, she assured him, adjusting the pad slightly while maintaining contact with her other hand on his neck. See, nothing bad happens. To her amazement and Marcus's visible relief, Storm accepted the pad with only minimal fidgeting. After a few moments of adjustment, he seemed to forget it was there, focusing instead on Emily's calm presence. From the observation area, Emily could hear excited murmurs. Doctor. Levine had stepped forward, clearly impressed by what she was seeing. That's remarkable acceptance, Marcus acknowledged, his earlier caution giving way to professional appreciation. Especially for a horse with his history. Emily nodded, her heart swelling with pride for Storm's courage. She stroked his neck, leaning close to his ear. You're doing so well, she whispered. They're all watching you, and you're showing them how brave you are. As if understanding her words, Storm nudged her gently with his muzzle. The exchange wasn't lost on Marcus, who shook his head in amazement. The bond between you is extraordinary, he said. But Emily, remember our agreement. This is as far as we go today. Emily met his gaze steadily. "He's ready for more," she said quietly. "I can feel it, and so am I." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "Emily, no. We agreed. I'm going to mount him," she said simply. "Just to sit, not to ride. To show them what's possible." Marcus's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous, too soon. You haven't been on a horse since the accident, and Storm has likely never been ridden properly. Which is why this moment matters so much," Emily insisted. "For both of us." They stared at each other, locked in silent battle. Finally, Emily played her strongest card. "If we don't convince Hargrove today, Storm dies tomorrow. Is that what you want?" Marcus closed his eyes briefly, clearly torn between professional caution and the undeniable truth of her words. "If, and I mean if, we were to consider this," he said finally, "we would need every possible safety measure in place. Spotters, crash pads, emergency response team on standby." Emily nodded eagerly. "Whatever it takes." "And your parents' explicit consent," Marcus added firmly. "I won't do this behind their backs." That gave Emily pause. Would her parents understand what she needed to do? Or would their fear for her safety, fear born from nearly losing her once before, prevent them from seeing the necessity of this moment? Before she could respond, Dr. Klein's voice called from the observation area. "Is there a problem?" Marcus turned, professional mask slipping back into place. "Just discussing next steps," he called back. "Emily has made excellent progress with Storm's ground training." "Impressive work, Doctor," Levine acknowledged. "But I believe our assessment time is coming to an end. Mr. Hargrove has another appointment." Emily felt panic rising in her chest. They were running out of time. If Hargrove left now, with the board meeting still scheduled for tomorrow, one more demonstration, she called out impulsively. "Something to show Storm's full potential." She turned to Marcus, eyes pleading. "Please," she whispered. "Help me do this right." The head trainer studied her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "Your parents first," he insisted. "I won't budge on that." Emily nodded quickly. "Call them over." As Marcus signaled for her parents to approach the fence, Emily continued working with Storm, walking him in small circles to keep him engaged and calm. The stallion responded beautifully, as if determined to prove himself worthy of her faith in him. When her parents reached the fence, their expressions were a mixture of pride and concern. "What's going on?" her father asked, eyes narrowing at Marcus's serious expression. "Emily wants to mount Storm," Marcus said bluntly. "Not to ride, just to sit. To demonstrate the level of trust they've established." Her mother gasped. "Absolutely not! It's too dangerous!" "Mom," Emily said quietly, leading Storm to the fence so she could speak directly to her parents. "I need to do this. For Storm, yes, but also for me." She took a deep breath. "I haven't been on a horse since Whisper died. I need to face that fear." Her father's expression softened with understanding, but her mother shook her head vigorously. "Emily, please. We almost lost you once, and I've been lost ever since," Emily interrupted gently. "Until now. Until Storm." Her parents exchanged looks, a silent communication built on years of marriage and shared parenting. "Marcus," her father said finally, "professionally speaking, how dangerous is this?" The trainer didn't sugarcoat his answer. "There's inherent risk," he acknowledged. "Storm has never been ridden as far as we know, and his history of abuse makes his reactions unpredictable. But," he added, glancing at Emily, "the bond he's formed with Emily is unlike anything I've seen. If anyone could do this safely, it's her. And if something goes wrong," her mother pressed, voice tight with fear. "We'll have every safety measure in place," Marcus assured her. "Emergency response team, spotters, crash pads. At the first sign of trouble, we intervene." Emily's father studied his daughter's face, seeing the determination there, the first real spark of the Emily they had known before the accident. "You really need this, don't you?" he asked quietly. She nodded, throat tight with emotion. "I do." After another long look between her parents, her father turned back to Marcus. "What do you need from us?" "Written consent," Marcus replied promptly. "And your support. Emily will need you both right now." As her father nodded gravely, her mother wiped away tears. "Be careful, baby," she whispered. "Please be careful." "I will," Emily promised, reaching through the fence to squeeze her mother's hand. "Thank you for understanding." While Marcus stepped away to make arrangements, Emily turned back to Storm, who had been waiting patiently throughout the discussion. "We're going to try something big," she told him softly. "Something scary for both of us. But we'll do it together, okay?" The stallion lowered his head to nuzzle her shoulder, as if offering reassurance of his own. The next 15 minutes passed in a flurry of activity. Marcus assembled a team of staff members, positioning them strategically around the paddock. Thick mats were placed on the ground in case of a fall. Dr. Santos stood by with medical equipment, his earlier opposition temporarily set aside in favor of ensuring everyone's safety. From the observation area, the specialists watched with professional interest, while Hargrove's expression had transformed from skepticism to grudging curiosity. Whatever he had expected from this visit, it clearly wasn't this. When all was ready, Marcus returned to Emily's side. "Last chance to reconsider," he said quietly. Emily shook her head, a calm certainty having settled over her. "I'm ready," Marcus nodded, handing her a riding helmet. "Safety first," he insisted. As Emily secured the helmet, her first since the accident, a cascade of memories washed over her. The weight of it, the snug fit, the ritual that had once been as natural as breathing. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest, images of Whisper's terrified eyes, of lightning and falling, but she pushed them firmly aside. "This is a different day," she whispered to herself. "A different horse, a different story." With Storm standing quietly beside a mounting block that had been brought in, Emily faced her moment of truth. Around her, the world seemed to fade, until there was nothing but her and the fiery red stallion waiting patiently for her next move. "I believe in you," she told him, stroking his neck one last time before stepping onto the mounting block. "And I need you to believe in me too." Storm turned his head to watch her, dark eyes intelligent and somehow knowing. As Emily stood on the block, now level with his back, she took one final deep breath. Then, with a smooth motion that belied her 9-month absence from riding, she swung her leg over and settled gently onto Storm's back. The world held its breath. For one heart-stopping moment, the world stood still. Emily sat frozen on Storm's back, her hands lightly resting on the bareback pad, barely breathing. The stallion had tensed beneath her, his muscles coiled with potential energy, his ears flicking rapidly back and forth as he processed this strange new sensation. Around the paddock, the staff members Marcus had positioned as spotters tensed, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. At the fence, Emily's mother gripped her husband's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. Even the usually impassive Hargrove had stepped forward, his expression a mixture of concern and fascination. Emily focused solely on Storm, blocking out everything else. She could feel the rapid rise and fall of his breathing, the subtle tremors running through his powerful body. This was the moment that would define everything for both of them. "It's okay," she murmured, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's just me. I won't hurt you." Storm's head turned slightly, one dark eye rolling back to see her on his back. Emily remained perfectly still, allowing him to process this new reality at his own pace. Seconds stretched into a full minute of breathless tension. Then, almost imperceptibly, Storm's muscles began to relax. His breathing steadied. His ears, which had been pinned back in anxiety, slowly rotated forward again. He accepted her. A collective sigh of relief swept through the onlookers. Marcus, who had been holding the lead rope with white-knuckled tension, allowed himself a small smile. "Good boy," Emily whispered, emotion making her voice tremble. "Such a good, brave boy." Carefully, moving with deliberate slowness, she stroked Storm's neck. The stallion remained calm, seemingly content with her gentle weight on his back. Emily felt tears welling in her eyes. Tears of pride, of relief, and of something deeper she couldn't quite name. This moment represented more than just a training breakthrough. For Storm, it was perhaps the first time in his life that human contact on his back hadn't meant pain or fear. For Emily, it was the first time since losing Whisper that she had felt that unique connection that exists between rider and horse, that profound trust that transcends words. "From the observation area, Doctor." Levine stepped forward. "Remarkable," she called, her professional demeanor briefly slipping to reveal genuine amazement. "The level of trust he's showing." Even Hargrove appeared impressed, his earlier skepticism giving way to thoughtful consideration, as he conferred quietly with Dr. Klein. "Should we try moving?" Marcus asked softly, still holding the lead rope securely. Emily considered this. They had already achieved more than she had dared hope, demonstrating that Storm could accept not just human proximity, but actual riding contact. Was it worth pushing further? Before she could decide, a sudden gust of wind sent a piece of equipment clattering to the ground outside the paddock. The sharp noise, so similar to the crack of a whip, triggered an immediate response in Storm. He jerked his head up, muscles tensing once more as fear flooded his system. "Easy," Emily said quickly, keeping her seat through the sudden movement. "Easy, Storm. It's nothing. You're safe." For a breathless moment, it could have gone either way. Storm's fight-or-flight instinct was clearly engaged, his body thrumming with adrenaline. But instead of bucking or bolting, reactions that had earned him his dangerous reputation, the stallion hesitated, listening to Emily's calm voice. "That's it," she encouraged, maintaining a steady rhythm with her words. "Nothing to fear. I'm right here with you." Gradually, miracle of miracles, Storm relaxed again. The potential explosion had been diffused by trust. Trust that Emily wouldn't let harm come to him. Trust that her presence meant safety rather than threat. Marcus exhaled slowly, nodding with professional appreciation. That, he said quietly, is what rehabilitation looks like. Emily smiled, continuing to stroke Storm's neck as she felt him settle completely beneath her. In that moment of crisis and recovery, they had demonstrated something profound, not just that Storm could tolerate human contact, but that he was developing the emotional regulation to overcome his fear responses. I think that's enough for today, she said, suddenly aware of how emotionally drained she felt. This brief session had required every ounce of her concentration and courage. Marcus nodded, clearly relieved that she wasn't pushing for more. Perfect timing. Always end on a success. With the same careful deliberation with which she had mounted, Emily prepared to dismount from Storm's back. I'm going to get down now, she told the horse softly. Stay calm, just like you've been doing. Storm stood perfectly still as she swung her leg back over and slid gently to the ground. The moment her feet touched earth, he turned his head to nuzzle her shoulder. A gesture so affectionate, so unlike his former aggression, that audible murmurs of amazement rose from the observers. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his mane to hide the tears that were now flowing freely. You did it, she whispered fiercely. You showed them who you really are. As Marcus moved in to remove the bareback pad and halter, Dr. Klein approached the fence, Hargrove and the specialist close behind. That was unexpected, the reserve director admitted. I've never seen anything like it, Dr. Levine was nodding enthusiastically. The recovery from that startle response was particularly significant. Traumatized horses typically can't self-regulate that effectively, especially not in novel situations. It certainly suggests potential, Dr. Patterson agreed. Far more than I would have anticipated based on his previous assessments. All eyes turned to Hargrove, whose opinion would ultimately carry the most weight with the board. The chairman's expression remained carefully neutral as he studied Storm, who was now calmly accepting Marcus's ministrations while keeping his head close to Emily. One demonstration with one specific handler doesn't guarantee he can be fully rehabilitated, Hargrove said finally, his tone measured. The liability concerns remain significant. Emily felt her heart sink. After everything Storm had shown them, was it still not enough? However, Hargrove continued, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the extraordinary progress demonstrated here today. He turned to Dr. Klein. I believe the board should reconsider its previous decision in light of this new evidence. Emily's breath caught. It wasn't a full reprieve, but it was hope, a chance for Storm that hadn't existed this morning. Does that mean? Her voice faltered, emotion making it difficult to form the words. Dr. Klein nodded, a small smile softening her professional demeanor. It means the euthanasia order is suspended pending further evaluation. Storm will get his chance to prove himself, thanks to you. The relief was so overwhelming that Emily's knees nearly buckled. She turned back to Storm, who was watching her with those intelligent dark eyes that seemed to understand far more than anyone gave him credit for. You're safe, she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. You're going to be okay. As the group began to disperse, Hargrove to his next appointment, the specialists to prepare their updated assessments, Marcus to oversee Storm's return to his regular routine, Emily's parents approached the fence. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, her father said, voice rough with emotion. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Her mother simply held out her arms, tears streaming down her face. Emily moved to the fence and embraced her parents through the bars, their family reconnecting in a way that had seemed impossible just days ago. He's amazing, Emily said, glancing back at Storm, who remained nearby, watching the interaction with curious eyes. He just needed someone to believe in him. Like you did, her father said softly. You both needed the same thing. Emily nodded, a sudden understanding washing over her. In helping Storm find his courage, she had somehow rediscovered her own. The silence that had imprisoned her for 9 months had been shattered not by the countless therapy sessions or her parents' patient encouragement, but by recognizing her own pain reflected in another soul. Doctor, Winters says that healing isn't about erasing the past, she said thoughtfully. It's about learning to carry it differently. Her mother wiped away tears. When did you get so wise? Emily smiled, the expression still feeling somewhat unfamiliar on her face after so many months of emptiness. I think Storm taught me that part. As the excitement of the morning's demonstration gradually settled, practical matters took precedence. Doctor? Klein approached with a tablet in hand, her expression more open than Emily had yet seen it. We need to discuss next steps, she said. Mr. Hargrove's intervention has bought us time, but the board will need a formal rehabilitation plan before making any permanent decision about Storm's future. Marcus joined them, having ensured Storm was comfortable. I've been thinking about that, he said. What Emily has achieved in a few days is remarkable, but long-term rehabilitation requires structure, consistency, and gradually expanding Storm's circle of trusted handlers. Emily felt a flicker of anxiety. I want to be part of that, she said quickly. Whatever plan you create, I need to be involved. Dr. Klein and Marcus exchanged glances. That's actually what we wanted to discuss, Dr. Klein said. Your parents mentioned you live in Billings. That's nearly 2 hours from here. Maintaining your involvement would require considerable commitment. The implication was clear. Storm's progress was intricately tied to Emily's presence. Without her, would he revert to his former aggressive behavior? We'll make it work, her father said firmly, surprising everyone. Emily needs this as much as Storm does, Dr. Klein nodded thoughtfully. In that case, I'd like to propose a formal arrangement. Emily would work with Marcus as a junior rehabilitation specialist, focusing primarily on Storm but also learning our general protocols with other rescue horses. Emily's eyes widened. Like an internship? Exactly, Marcus confirmed. 3 days a week to start, expanding to full-time during summer break if things progress well. We'd coordinate with your school for partial credit. It was more than Emily had dared hope for, not just a reprieve for Storm, but a structured path forward for both of them. She looked to her parents, hardly daring to breathe as they considered the proposal. It would mean a lot of driving, her mother said slowly, and making sure your schoolwork doesn't suffer. But it would also mean continuing the progress you've made, her father finished, both with Storm and with your own recovery. Emily held her breath as her parents communicated silently with each other, the subtle expressions and minute gestures that she had observed throughout her childhood whenever they faced an important decision. Finally, her father turned back to Dr. Klein. We'd need to work out the logistics, but conceptually we support the arrangement. Emily's heart soared. She turned to look at Storm, who had been watching the entire exchange with alert interest, as if somehow understanding that his future was being determined. You hear that? She called to him. We're going to be partners. The stallion nickered softly, a sound of recognition that brought fresh tears to Emily's eyes. After 9 months of silence and grief, she had found her voice. After a lifetime of abuse and fear, Storm had found his person. It wasn't the end of their journey, merely the end of the beginning. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Emily's life, which had been so empty and colorless since the accident, suddenly overflowed with purpose. 3 days a week, immediately after school, her father would drive her to Eagle Heights Reserve for her internship hours. On Saturdays, the entire family made the trip, her mother gradually overcoming her fear as she watched Emily's confident work with Storm. The formal rehabilitation plan developed jointly by Marcus, Dr. Klein, and the behavior specialists centered on gradually expanding Storm's circle of trusted humans while building his confidence through consistent training. Emily remained his primary handler, but each session now included structured interaction with at least one other staff member. The goal is transferable trust, Marcus explained as they worked. He needs to learn that his positive experiences with you can extend to others. It was slow, painstaking work. Storm remained wary of strangers, especially men, and would still occasionally retreat into defensive posturing when startled or confused. But the violent outburst that had earned him his deadly reputation never resurfaced. With each small success, each new skill mastered, his confidence grew. Emily blossomed alongside him. The silent, withdrawn girl who had arrived at Eagle Heights just weeks ago had been replaced by a focused, articulate young woman with a gift for understanding troubled horses. Dr. Winters, who continued their therapy sessions, marveled at the transformation. What you've done with Storm isn't just rehabilitation, she told Emily during one session. It's reciprocal healing. You've created a safe space for each other to process trauma and build new patterns. Emily considered this as she brushed Storm's gleaming coat after a particularly successful training session. The stallion had allowed Marcus to lead him through an obstacle course without Emily's direct involvement, a significant milestone that had earned praise from everyone, including the still cautious Dr. Klein. We fixed each other, she murmured to Storm, who was dozing contentedly under her rhythmic brushing. Though I think you might have saved me more than I saved you. The stallion flicked an ear back at the sound of her voice but remained in his relaxed state, a far cry from the hyper-vigilant, reactive animal she had first encountered. As Emily continued grooming, she noticed a group of visitors being led on a tour of the rehabilitation area. Usually the tours stayed well away from Storm's paddock, but today Marcus was leading them directly toward the fence. Curious, Emily set down her brush and moved closer. "This is Storm," Marcus was explaining to the group, mostly adults, though Emily spotted a teenage boy in a wheelchair near the back. "He's part of our specialized rehabilitation program for severely traumatized horses." The visitors murmured with interest, several taking photos of the striking red stallion. "And this," Marcus continued, gesturing toward Emily, "is Emily Carter, our junior rehabilitation specialist who has been instrumental in Storm's progress." Emily felt a flush of pride at the introduction. Just weeks ago, she had been defined solely by her trauma, the silent girl, the broken victim. Now she had an identity beyond her pain. "How do you get him to trust you?" asked the boy in the wheelchair, his voice carrying a tone of genuine curiosity rather than the sensationalism Emily had come to expect from most visitors asking about Storm. She approached the fence, Storm following closely behind her. "It's not about making him trust me," she explained. "It's about creating a space where he feels safe enough to choose trust." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "Like he knows you won't hurt him even when he's scared?" "Exactly," Emily smiled, something about the boy's perceptiveness resonating with her. "Everyone treated him like he was dangerous because he was afraid. But fear isn't the same as aggression, even when they look similar from the outside." The boy wheeled himself closer to the fence, his guardians hovering protectively nearby. "I get that," he said quietly. "People treat you differently when you're broken." Emily's breath caught at the simple truth in his words. "I'm Emily," she said, extending her hand through the fence. "Michael," the boy replied, shaking her hand with a firm grip. "I was thrown from a horse last year, broke my back. Doctors say I might not walk again." The casual way he delivered this devastating information reminded Emily of her own detachment during the worst months of her silence, that strange distance from one's own tragedy that sometimes feels like the only way to survive it. "I used to ride too," she said, matching his matter-of-fact tone. "My horse died in an accident 9 months ago. I stopped talking after that, completely, until I met Storm." Michael's eyes widened slightly, not with pity but with recognition. "How did you start again?" "Talking, I mean." Emily glanced back at Storm, who had moved to stand directly behind her, his head hovering protectively over her shoulder. "I found someone who understood my pain without needing me to explain it," she said simply. And somehow that made the words come back. Michael studied Storm with new interest. "He's beautiful," he said. "Most people would have given up on a horse with his reputation." "Most people gave up on me too," Emily admitted. "Except my parents and my therapist. They kept trying even when I couldn't respond." A thoughtful silence fell between them, a moment of shared understanding that needed no further words. Then Michael straightened in his wheelchair, a new resolution in his eyes. "Could I meet him? Storm, I mean." "Up close?" His guardians immediately protested, citing safety concerns, but Emily found herself nodding. "Marcus," she called, interrupting the trainer's explanation to the rest of the group. Would it be possible for Michael to meet Storm properly? Inside the secure area, Marcus hesitated, glancing between the boy in the wheelchair and the horse with the complicated history. But something in Emily's confident expression must have convinced him. "Let me check with Dr. Klein," he said, pulling out his radio. "No promises, but we might be able to arrange a supervised visit." As Marcus stepped away to make the call, Emily turned back to Michael, who was watching Storm with a mixture of apprehension and determination that felt achingly familiar. "He can sense fear," she warned gently. "But he can also sense honesty. You don't have to pretend you're not scared." Michael nodded, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair a little tighter. "I haven't been near a horse since the accident," he admitted. "My therapist says exposure therapy might help, but it's terrifying," Emily finished for him. "I know." By the time Marcus returned with tentative approval from Dr. Klein, the rest of the tour group had moved on, leaving just Michael and his guardians, an aunt and uncle Emily had gathered from their conversation. Dr. Klein has authorized a brief, supervised interaction," Marcus explained, his professional tone not quite hiding his reservations. "Emily will remain Storm's primary handler with me as secondary support. Standard safety protocols apply." Michael's aunt still looked concerned. "Are you sure this is safe? We've heard stories about this horse." "Storm has made tremendous progress," Marcus assured her, though Emily noticed he didn't directly answer the safety question. "And Emily has demonstrated exceptional skill in managing his behavior." As the adults discussed liability waivers and safety procedures, Emily knelt beside Michael's wheelchair. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "It's okay if you've changed your mind." The boy shook his head firmly. "I need to do this," he said. "I've been afraid for too long." Emily recognized the resolution in his voice, the same determination that had driven her to face her own fears with Storm. I'll be right there with you, she promised. The next half hour unfolded with methodical care. Michael's wheelchair was maneuvered through the specially widened gate into the secure area of the paddock. Emily brought Storm to his hitching post, where the stallion stood calmly, watching the proceedings with alert interest. We'll go slowly, Emily explained, standing between Storm and Michael. First, I'll just have him get used to your presence. Then, if he seems comfortable, you can approach him, but only if you feel ready. Michael nodded, his earlier confidence now tinged with visible nervousness as he confronted the reality of being in close proximity to a horse for the first time since his accident. Emily turned to Storm, speaking to him in the gentle, clear voice she had developed during their weeks of work together. This is Michael, she told the stallion. He's a friend. He's been hurt too, like us. Storm's ears flicked forward at the sound of her voice, his dark eyes moving between Emily and the boy in the wheelchair. There was curiosity in his gaze, but no fear, a remarkable transformation from the hypervigilant animal he had once been. Slowly, Emily led Storm in a wide circle around Michael, allowing horse and boy to observe each other from a safe distance. With each circuit, she decreased the radius slightly, bringing Storm incrementally closer while watching carefully for signs of distress from either of them. Michael remained still in his wheelchair, his eyes never leaving the magnificent red stallion. His initial tension had given way to a sort of wondering attention, the same expression Emily had seen on her own face in photos her mother had taken during recent training sessions. When Storm was about 10 feet away, Emily stopped. "How are you doing?" she asked Michael. "Good," he replied, his voice steadier than she had expected. "He's so much bigger up close," Emily smiled. "That's often the first thing people notice. But size isn't the same as threat." Can I touch him?" Michael asked hesitantly. Emily considered this. Storm had been calm throughout the introduction, showing none of the anxiety markers she had learned to recognize. Still, direct contact represented a significant threshold. "Let's have him approach you," she suggested. "That way he's making the choice." With Michael's agreement, Emily positioned Storm about 6 feet away, then released the lead rope, keeping hold only of the end. This gave the stallion freedom to move toward or away from Michael as he chose, while still providing Emily with ultimate control for safety. "It's his decision now," she explained to Michael. "Just like you had to decide whether to come here today, he gets to decide whether to come to you." For several long moments, Storm remained where Emily had positioned him, head high as he studied the boy in the wheelchair. Michael waited patiently, his initial nervousness giving way to a sort of peaceful acceptance. Then, with the deliberate grace that still took Emily's breath away, Storm stepped forward. One careful hoof after another, he approached Michael until he stood directly before the wheelchair. Lowering his massive head, he extended his muzzle toward the boy's outstretched hand. The contact, when it came, drew gasps from Michael's aunt and uncle, watching anxiously from beyond the fence. Storm's velvet nose touched Michael's palm with gentle curiosity, his breath warm against the boy's skin. "Hi," Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's nice to meet you." Emily stood nearby, lead rope held loosely, watching as something profound passed between boy and horse, some unspoken recognition that transcended their respective traumas. In Storm's gentle acceptance of Michael, she saw her own healing journey reflected, the gradual reclaiming of courage in the face of fear. The session concluded without incident, Storm remaining calm and attentive throughout. As Michael was wheeled back out of the paddock, his face glowed with a quiet pride that Emily recognized all too well. "Thank you," he said simply. "Both of you." As she watched Michael leave with his guardians, Emily felt a strange sense of completion. The circle that had begun with her own healing had expanded to include someone else's journey, a ripple effect she hadn't anticipated when she first reached through the fence toward a condemned horse. "That was a risk," Marcus commented quietly, joining her at the fence. "A calculated one, but still a risk." Emily nodded, watching as Storm returned to grazing peacefully in his paddock. "Some risks are worth taking," she said. "I think you taught me that." Marcus smiled wryly. "Did I? I seem to recall trying to talk you out of most of your riskier ideas. But you let me try them anyway," Emily pointed out. "When it mattered most." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint Storm's red coat with golden light. In the weeks since that pivotal demonstration for Hargrove and the board, Emily had come to respect Marcus not just as a trainer, but as a mentor. Someone who understood that healing, like rehabilitation, couldn't be rushed or forced. "Doctor, Klein mentioned that Michael's family has inquired about regular visits," Marcus said casually. Apparently, his therapist was quite impressed with his response to today's session. Emily felt a surge of satisfaction. "He needs this," she said confidently. "The same way I did." "Which got me thinking," Marcus continued. What you did today, creating that space of safety and connection for Michael and Storm, that's the essence of equine therapy. It's not so different from what we've been doing in rehabilitation, just with a different focus. Emily considered this, remembering Dr. Winter's words about reciprocal healing. You think Storm could become a therapy horse? She asked, surprised by the suggestion. After everything he's been through? I think, Marcus said carefully, that sometimes the most wounded souls have the most to offer others in pain. Storm understands trauma in a way our perfectly socialized horses never will. That understanding is what Michael responded to today. The idea took root in Emily's mind, expanding with possibilities. Storm, once deemed too dangerous to live, becoming a source of healing for others who, like Emily and Michael, carried invisible wounds. It would take a lot more work, she acknowledged. More socialization, more desensitization. And the right handler, Marcus added meaningfully. Someone who understands him completely. Emily's heart quickened as she grasped what Marcus was suggesting. Not just an internship, but a future. A purpose that united her own healing journey with Storm's remarkable transformation. Do you think Dr. Klein would consider it? She asked cautiously. A specialized therapy program with Storm? Marcus smiled. That's the other thing I wanted to tell you. Hargrove called today after hearing about Michael's visit. He wants to fund a pilot program. Emily's eyes widened. Seriously? The same Hargrove who wanted to put Storm down a month ago? The very same, Marcus confirmed. Apparently his niece, the one who was injured in the riding accident last year, has been struggling with severe anxiety since the incident. He's been looking for alternative therapy approaches. And now he thinks Storm might help, Emily realized. Marcus nodded. Nothing's decided yet. Dr. Klein wants to see at least 3 more months of solid progress with Storm's general rehabilitation before considering any therapy applications. But the door is open. Emily turned back to watch Storm, who had settled in his favorite spot beneath the lone pine tree in his paddock. The stallion, who had once been written off as a lost cause, as too damaged to save, now stood at the threshold of a new beginning. Not just surviving his past, but transcending it. 3 more months, she repeated thoughtfully. What would we need to accomplish in that time? Marcus recognized the determination in her voice. The same focused resolve that had turned a silent, traumatized girl into an effective horse handler in just a few short weeks. I was hoping you'd ask that, he said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. I've drafted a training schedule. Ambitious, but doable with your level of commitment. As they discussed the details of Storm's continued rehabilitation, Emily felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path forward wouldn't be easy, for her or for Storm. There would be setbacks, difficult days when trauma's shadow reasserted itself. But for the first time since losing Whisper, she could envision a future beyond mere survival. What she couldn't know yet was how that future would unfold, or how many lives would be touched by the unlikely bond between a silent girl and a condemned horse. That story was still being written, one tentative step at a time. But as Storm raised his head to gaze at her across the paddock, eyes filled with a trust that had been hard-won on both sides, Emily felt certain of one thing. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Neither of them was broken beyond repair. Neither of them was defined by their past. And in that shared understanding lay the most powerful healing of all. 3 months passed with the rhythm of seasons changing across the Montana landscape. Summer's heat gave way to autumn's crisp mornings, painting Eagle Heights Reserve in hues of gold and amber. The transformation of the land mirrored the ongoing evolution happening within Storm's paddock and indeed within Emily herself. Watch his ears, Emily instructed, her voice carrying across the training arena where a new intern, a college student named Aisha, was working with Storm on a basic leading exercise. See how they're flicking back and forth? He's processing multiple inputs right now. Give him a moment to focus. From her position at the edge of the arena, Emily observed with a trainer's eye, noting every subtle shift in Storm's body language. The stallion had come so far from the dangerous, reactive animal she had first encountered. Now he stood calmly, if somewhat uncertainly, as Aisha guided him through familiar patterns. That's it, Emily encouraged as the stallion relaxed, his attention settling on Aisha. Perfect timing, Doctor. Klein stood beside Emily, clipboard in hand, as she documented the session. The reserve director had become a more frequent presence at Storm's training over the past weeks, her initial skepticism gradually replaced by professional interest. His response time to unfamiliar handlers has improved significantly, she noted, jotting observations. The hesitation period has decreased from approximately 40 seconds to under 15. Emily nodded, pride warming her chest. He's generalizing his trust, she explained. learning that the positive experiences he had with me can extend to others. 6 months ago, Emily couldn't have imagined herself speaking with such confidence, much less using technical terminology she'd absorbed through countless hours studying equine behavior. Now terms like positive reinforcement, desensitization thresholds, and approach retreat training peppered her everyday vocabulary. "You realize you're doing my job?" Marcus commented wryly as he joined them, having finished working with another rescue horse. "Soon you'll be running this place and I'll be out of work." Emily laughed, another sound that had once seemed lost to her forever. "I still have a lot to learn," she said, watching as Aisha completed the exercise with Storm and rewarded him with praise and a treat from the pouch at her hip. "Your progress report from school came in, Doctor," Klein mentioned, flipping to another page on her clipboard. "Your science teacher was particularly impressed with your independent research project on equine trauma responses." Emily smiled, thinking of how different school felt now compared to those dark months after the accident. Where once she had moved through the hallways like a ghost, silent and disconnected, she now participated fully, her newfound purpose at Eagle Heights spilling over into renewed academic engagement. "Speaking of progress reports," Marcus interjected, his tone shifting to business, "Hargrove is coming tomorrow to observe our final assessment sessions. If Storm performs as well as he has been, Doctor, Klein and I believe he'll be ready to begin the specialized therapy program discussions." Emily's heart quickened. This was what they had been working toward for months. Formal recognition that Storm had transitioned from rehabilitation subject to potential therapy horse. The implications went far beyond Storm's daily routine. This would secure his future at Eagle Heights permanently, removing the last lingering threat of euthanasia. "We'll be ready," she said confidently, though a flutter of nerves danced in her stomach. So much rested on tomorrow's demonstration. As Aisha completed the training session and led Storm back to his paddock, Emily followed, wanting a few private moments with the stallion before heading home for the day. "Hey, handsome," she greeted him as Aisha handed over the lead rope with a smile and departed. "Big day tomorrow, you know." Storm nudged her shoulder affectionately, his once wary eyes now soft with trust. Emily led him to his grooming station, a ritual they both enjoyed at day's end. As she brushed his gleaming coat, she found herself talking through her thoughts, a habit she'd developed during the early days of their work together. "Michael's coming tomorrow too," she told the stallion, referring to the boy in the wheelchair who had become a regular visitor. Over the past 3 months, Michael had progressed from simple interaction with Storm to actual therapeutic riding sessions, his physical therapist working in tandem with Marcus to develop exercises that strengthened his core and improved his balance. "And Mr. Hargrove's niece might come as well," Emily continued, working out a tangle in Storm's mane. "Her name's Amanda. She hasn't been near a horse since her accident last year, but her therapist thinks she's ready to try, just like Michael was." Storm listened with the attentive expression Emily had come to recognize, head slightly tilted, ears forward, eyes soft. Sometimes she wondered how much he actually understood, and other times she was certain he comprehended far more than anyone realized. "This is your chance to show everyone who you really are," she said softly, resting her forehead against his neck. "Who you've always been, underneath all that fear." Storm blew out a gentle breath that ruffled her hair, his way of communicating affection. Emily smiled, remembering how far they'd both come since that first moment of connection through the paddock fence. "We did it, didn't we?" she murmured. "We found our way back." As she finished grooming and prepared to leave for the day, Emily noticed Dr. Winters approaching the paddock. Her therapist visited Eagle Heights occasionally to observe her work with Storm, but usually by appointment. "This is a surprise," Emily greeted her, securing Storm's paddock gate. "Doctor," Winters smiled warmly. "I was in the area for another appointment and thought I'd stop by. Marcus mentioned the big assessment is tomorrow." "It is," Emily confirmed, falling into step beside her therapist as they walked toward the main buildings. "If all goes well, Storm will be officially classified as a therapy horse in training." "Quite a journey, Doctor," Winters observed. "For both of you," Emily nodded, glancing back at Storm's paddock. "Sometimes I can hardly remember that silent girl who came here 6 months ago, or the horse everyone was afraid to approach. Yet those experiences shaped who you both became." Dr. Winters pointed out gently. "The capacity for healing you've demonstrated, individually and together, that's the remarkable part." They paused at a scenic overlook where Eagle Heights Reserve spread below them, the late afternoon sun gilding the autumn landscape. In the distance, Emily could see other rescued horses grazing peacefully, animals that had once faced neglect or abuse, now safe and in various stages of rehabilitation. I've been thinking about the future, Emily said after a comfortable silence. About what happens after high school. Doctor. Winters raised an eyebrow, inviting her to continue. I want to study equine-assisted therapy, Emily explained, to develop programs specifically for trauma survivors, people and horses both. The idea had been forming gradually over the past months, crystallizing into a vision that excited her in a way nothing had since before the accident. That seems like a natural evolution, Dr. Winters observed. You've essentially been developing your own methodology through your work with Storm. Emily nodded, surprised but pleased by her therapist's supportive response. Marcus says several universities have good programs. Colorado State, UC Davis. Your parents know about these plans? We've started discussing it, Emily replied. They're supportive, just concerned about distance. They've been pretty protective since... She trailed off, not needing to specify. Doctor? Winters nodded, understanding. That's natural given what you've all been through. But I've seen tremendous growth in your parents too, Emily. They're learning to balance protection with allowing you to pursue your path. The conversation shifted to practical matters, university requirements, scholarship opportunities, internship possibilities that would strengthen her applications. By the time they reached the main office where Emily's father would soon arrive to pick her up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose about the next day's assessment and the future it might open. You know, Doctor, Winters said as they parted, when I first heard about your connection with Storm, I worried it might become a substitute for broader healing, a way to avoid processing your trauma with Whisper by focusing on saving another horse. Emily was surprised by the frank admission. Was it? She asked, genuinely curious about her therapist's perspective. Doctor. Winters smiled thoughtfully. I don't believe so. Instead, you use that connection as a bridge, not just back to the world, but to a deeper understanding of yourself. That's the difference between avoidance and growth. As her father's car appeared in the parking lot, Emily felt a wave of gratitude for the network of support that had developed around her. Parents who drove hundreds of miles each week to facilitate her internship, a therapist who challenged while supporting her, mentors like Marcus who recognized her potential, and of course, Storm himself, whose trust had restored her faith in her own worth. Tomorrow will be a good day, Doctor, Winters said confidently, giving Emily's shoulder a gentle squeeze before departing. Emily wished she could feel the same certainty, but as she rode home with her father, discussing the details of tomorrow's assessment, a familiar anxiety crept along the edges of her mind. So much depended on Storm's performance, on her ability to demonstrate his transformation convincingly. What if something went wrong? What if Storm became overwhelmed by too many new people? What if Amanda's fear triggered his own trauma responses? The questions multiplied as evening fell, following Emily through dinner with her parents and into her bedroom, where she sat cross-legged on her bed, reviewing her training notes. A soft knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Everything okay in there? Her mother asked, entering with 2 mugs of tea. You've been quiet tonight. Emily accepted the offered mug gratefully. Just thinking about tomorrow, she admitted. I know Storm is ready, but there are so many variables you can't control, her mother finished understandingly, settling beside her on the bed. That's always the hardest part. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping tea. Emily's gaze drifted to her dresser, where a framed photo of Whisper now stood, a picture she had kept hidden in a drawer during those silent months when the sight of her lost horse had been too painful to bear. Following her daughter's gaze, Margaret reached for the frame, studying the image of Emily atop the dappled gray mare, both of them captured mid-jump, the perfect harmony of rider and horse frozen in time. You know, her mother said thoughtfully, I was terrified when you started working with Storm. After nearly losing you once, she shook her head, emotion making her voice catch. But watching you these past months, seeing you come back to life, I realized something important. Emily waited, curious. Loving someone means supporting their journey, even when that journey scares you, Margaret continued, returning the frame to its place. When you first wanted to ride Whisper, I was scared then too, but I couldn't let my fear limit your joy. Emily leaned against her mother's shoulder, unexpectedly moved by the confession. Thank you, she said simply, for believing in me. With Whisper and now with Storm. Always, her mother assured her. Now, what specifically are you worried about for tomorrow? Grateful for the practical turn in conversation, Emily outlined her concerns. The number of observers, Amanda's first encounter with Storm, the formal evaluation protocols that would feel different from their usual training sessions. It sounds like you're mainly worried about too many new variables at once, her mother observed. What would Marcus advise in that situation? Emily considered this, remembering the rehabilitation principles she'd learned over the past months. Control the environment as much as possible, she said slowly. Introduce new elements gradually. Maintain a consistent foundation. So how might you apply that tomorrow? The question sparked a realization. Emily had been thinking about the assessment as a performance, something she and Storm needed to execute perfectly. But that approach contradicted everything she'd learned about effective rehabilitation. I need to structure the session in layers, she said, reaching for her notebook and pen. Start with familiar routines to establish confidence, then introduce new elements one at a time. As she sketched out a revised plan for the assessment, Emily felt her anxiety begin to dissipate. By approaching tomorrow as simply another rehabilitation session, albeit an important one, she could create the stable framework Storm needed to succeed. Better? Her mother asked, watching the focused determination return to her daughter's expression. Emily nodded, offering a grateful smile. Much better. Thanks, Mom. Later, as she drifted towards sleep, Emily found herself thinking not of tomorrow's challenges, but of Dr. Winter's words about bridges. In helping Storm cross the divide between his traumatic past and a hopeful future, she had inadvertently built her own path forward as well. Whatever happened tomorrow, that truth remained. They had already succeeded in the ways that mattered most. Dawn broke clear and cold over Eagle Heights Reserve. Emily arrived earlier than usual, wanting time to prepare Storm and the environment before the assessment team gathered. To her surprise, Marcus was already there, making adjustments to the training arena. Couldn't sleep either? He asked, echoing their exchange from months ago. Emily smiled, setting down her backpack. I wanted to run through our foundation exercises with Storm first to help him settle. Marcus nodded approval. Good instinct. Keep it relaxed and positive. Today isn't about pushing boundaries, it's about demonstrating the boundaries he's already crossed. As Emily headed to Storm's paddock, she found the stallion waiting at the fence, nickering softly in greeting. His transformation from the aggressive, fear-driven animal she had first encountered never failed to move her. Where once he had paced in agitated wariness, he now approached with confident curiosity, ears forward and eyes bright. "Morning, handsome," she called, entering the paddock with the easy familiarity they had developed. "Ready for our big day?" Storm approached with a relaxed, swinging stride that would have been unimaginable months ago. Emily took a moment just to appreciate how far he had come, his coat gleaming with health, his eyes clear and confident, his body language open rather than defensive. Their warm-up session unfolded with the rhythm of long practice. Basic groundwork first, leading, stopping, turning, then more complex patterns that demonstrated Storm's trust and responsiveness. Emily kept the exercises brief and rewarding, prioritizing positive experiences over technical perfection. "Beautiful work," Marcus commented as he joined them, observing the final minutes of their warm-up. "He's completely focused on you, even with all the activity around the reserve this morning." Emily nodded, noticing for the first time the increased movement around the property as staff prepared for the assessment. Vehicles were arriving in the parking area, and unfamiliar voices carried on the crisp morning air. "Is Hargrove here yet?" she asked, keeping her tone casual for Storm's benefit while her heart rate quickened. "Just arrived," Marcus confirmed, along with Dr. Klein, the behavior specialist, and... He hesitated briefly. "The full board of directors." Emily's eyes widened. "The entire board? I thought it would just be Hargrove and maybe a few others." Marcus shrugged apologetically. Apparently word has spread about Storm's progress. This has become something of a showcase for the reserve's rehabilitation capabilities. The pressure of expectation settled heavily on Emily's shoulders. No longer was this simply about Storm's individual future. It had become a demonstration of Eagle Heights' methods and success rates, with potential implications for funding, expansion, and other rescue horses. "No pressure," she muttered, earning a sympathetic smile from Marcus. "Just focus on Storm," he advised. "The rest will follow. They're giving us another 20 minutes before the formal assessment begins." As Marcus departed to complete final preparations, Emily turned back to Storm, who had been watching their exchange with alert interest. "Looks like we've got a bigger audience than expected," she told him, stroking his gleaming neck. "But it's still just you and me in here, like always. Nothing changes that." The stallion nudged her shoulder gently as if offering reassurance of his own. Emily smiled, drawing strength from his steady presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as they had done from that first moment of connection through the paddock fence. By the time Marcus returned to escort them to the assessment arena, Emily had settled her nerves into a focused calm. She led Storm with confident purpose, maintaining the relaxed but aware state they had practiced extensively. The sight that greeted them at the arena, however, tested her composure. A group of at least 20 people had gathered, board members in business attire, staff in reserve uniforms, specialists with clipboards, and several unfamiliar faces Emily assumed were potential program supporters. Among them, she spotted Michael in his wheelchair, accompanied by his physical therapist. Beside them stood a slender teenage girl with her arm in a cast, Amanda, Emily presumed, Hargrove's niece. The girl's tense posture and wide eyes betrayed her anxiety at being near the horses. Marcus leaned close as they approached. "Remember the plan," he murmured. "Foundation work first. We'll introduce Michael and Amanda only if Storm is showing full confidence." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath as they entered the arena. The audience fell silent, all eyes following the fiery red stallion who had once been deemed too dangerous to approach. "Doctor." Klein stepped forward to begin the formal proceedings. For those unfamiliar with Storm's history, she addressed the group, "This stallion came to us approximately 7 months ago with severe trauma-induced aggression. After multiple serious incidents with staff, including injuries requiring hospitalization, Storm was scheduled for euthanasia." Emily felt Storm tense slightly beside her, responding to the unfamiliar voices and focused attention. She stroked his neck reassuringly, maintaining their connection. "Emily Carter," Dr. Klein continued, gesturing toward her, "established an unprecedented breakthrough with Storm. Under her guidance and Marcus Fletcher's supervision, Storm has undergone what we believe is a complete rehabilitation. Today's assessment will evaluate his suitability for transition to our therapeutic riding program." Hargrove stepped forward next, his imposing presence commanding attention. Emily was struck by how different he seemed from their first encounter, less dismissive, more genuinely engaged. What Eagle Heights has accomplished with this animal represents not just rehabilitation, but transformation, he stated. If successful, Storm's case could become a model for working with severely traumatized equines nationwide. The pressure of expectation increased exponentially with each word. Emily focused on her breathing, on the solid warmth of Storm beside her, on the months of patient work that had brought them to this moment. "We'll begin with basic handling and responsiveness assessments," Marcus announced, taking control of the proceedings with professional confidence. "Emily will demonstrate Storm's foundation training first, then we'll progress to unfamiliar handlers if appropriate." With that, the formal assessment began. Emily led Storm through increasingly complex patterns, demonstrating his responsiveness to verbal and physical cues. The stallion performed beautifully, his attention unwavering despite the audience. Where once he had reacted with fear-driven aggression to the slightest pressure, he now showed willing cooperation and remarkable focus. "Perfect vertical flexion, Doctor," Levine noted as Storm responded to a subtle rein cue, bending his neck in elegant compliance, especially impressive given his history of head shyness from previous abuse. After 20 minutes of foundation work, Marcus signaled the transition to the next phase, interaction with secondary handlers. Aisha, the college intern who had been working regularly with Storm, entered the arena and took the lead rope from Emily, who stepped back but remained nearby. Storm's ears flicked uncertainly, but he remained calm as Aisha led him through simple exercises. The specialists made notes on their clipboards, while board members murmured appreciatively. "Now for a more challenging test," Marcus announced once Storm had completed the work with Aisha successfully. "We'll introduce a handler Storm has met only twice before in controlled settings." A reserve staff member named David entered the arena. Storm immediately tensed, his previous negative experiences with male handlers evident in his posture. Emily held her breath, watching carefully for signs of the old fear response that had once defined him. David approached slowly, following the protocol they had developed for new handlers. No direct eye contact, relaxed posture, hands visible. Storm's ears flicked rapidly back and forth, but he didn't retreat or show aggression. When David took the lead rope, Storm followed his cues, less confidently than with Emily or Aisha, but with clear willingness to try. The simple fact that he accepted a relative stranger, especially a male one, represented a monumental achievement. "Remarkable progress," Dr. Patterson commented. The generalization of trust to multiple handlers is particularly significant given his history. As David completed his portion and exited the arena, Emily returned to Storm's side, offering quiet praise and reassurance. The stallion visibly relaxed at her familiar presence, lowering his head to nudge her shoulder affectionately. Marcus approached, keeping his voice low. "He's doing beautifully," he said. "I think we're ready for the next phase, potential therapy interactions with Michael and Amanda. Are you comfortable proceeding?" Emily glanced at Storm, assessing his energy and stress levels. The stallion was alert but calm, showing none of the tension markers she had learned to recognize. "Yes," she decided. But let's start with Michael since he's already worked with Storm. Amanda can observe first to help ease her anxiety. Marcus nodded agreement and returned to the audience, where he conferred briefly with Dr. Klein before inviting Michael forward. The boy wheeled himself into the arena confidently, a smile lighting his face as he approached. "Hey, Storm," he called, familiar enough now to greet the horse directly. "Looking good today, buddy." The stallion's ears pricked forward at the sound of Michael's voice, recognition evident in his posture. Over the past months, they had developed their own relationship through regular sessions, with Emily acting as facilitator rather than intermediary. What followed was a demonstration of the therapeutic exercises Michael and Storm had been practicing, stretches designed to strengthen the boy's core muscles, reaching exercises that challenged his balance, and finally, with assistance from his physical therapist, a transfer from the wheelchair to Storm's back where Michael sat proudly, supported but increasingly independent. Throughout the demonstration, Storm remained steady and attentive, seeming to understand the importance of his role. The assembled board members watched with visible approval, several taking photos and notes. When Michael returned to his wheelchair, his face glowed with achievement. 3 months ago, I couldn't sit without support for more than 30 seconds, he told the audience. Now I can ride for 15 minutes. My doctor says my core strength has improved more in the past 3 months than in the whole year before that. The simplicity and power of his testimony affected everyone present. Emily noticed several board members wiping away tears, including, surprisingly, the formidable Hargrove himself. "Thank you, Michael," Dr. Klein said warmly. "Your progress is inspiring." As Michael wheeled himself back to the observation area, all eyes turned to Amanda, the final test of the assessment. The teenage girl had been watching intently, her body language a mixture of longing and fear. Hargrove approached his niece, speaking quietly. Though Emily couldn't hear their words, she could see the gentle encouragement in his expression. Finally, Amanda nodded and stood, her uninjured arm clutching her cast protectively as she took hesitant steps toward the arena entrance. Emily led Storm to meet her at the gate, positioning the stallion at an angle that felt less confrontational. "Hi, Amanda," she greeted warmly. "This is Storm." The girl managed a tight smile, her eyes fixed on the massive red stallion with visible apprehension. "He's bigger than I expected," she said faintly. "Most people say that," Emily acknowledged, remembering her conversation with Michael months ago. "But size isn't the same as threat." Amanda nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. Emily recognized the particular quality of her fear, not the general nervousness of someone unfamiliar with horses, but the specific trauma response of someone who had experienced a serious riding accident. "Storm knows about fear," Emily said gently. "He lived with it for a long time. When I first met him, he was so scared he would attack anyone who came near him." Amanda's eyes widened slightly. "Really? But he seems so calm." "He is now," Emily agreed, "because he learned that not everyone would hurt him. It took time and a lot of small steps." She paused, then added, "Would you like to take a small step today?" After a moment's hesitation, Amanda nodded. Emily guided her to stand at a comfortable distance from Storm, explaining each aspect of safe interaction in simple, matter-of-fact terms. Unlike Michael's approached confidence, Amanda required a much gentler introduction. Emily recognized that this moment was as much about Amanda's healing as it was about assessing Storm's capabilities. "You can just watch it first," Emily assured her. "No pressure to do anything more." But as Storm stood quietly, his gentle presence seemingly at odds with his powerful physique, Amanda's curiosity gradually overcame her fear. She took a small step closer, then another. "His coat looks so soft," she commented. "It is," Emily confirmed. "Would you like to touch him?" "Just on the shoulder here, the safest place to start." After another moment's hesitation, Amanda extended her uninjured hand, fingers trembling slightly. Storm remained perfectly still, as if understanding the significance of this moment. When her fingertips finally made contact with his coat, Amanda's breath caught. "He's warm," she said, sounding surprised. Emily smiled, recognizing the beginning of connection. "Yes, living creatures usually are." That simple observation seemed to shift something in Amanda's perception. She spread her palm against Storm's shoulder, her touch becoming more confident. "I used to ride every weekend," she said quietly, the words emerging unprompted. "Before the accident. I loved it more than anything," Emily nodded, allowing the girl space to process her emotions. "It's hard to lose something you love." "I dream about falling," Amanda continued, her hand still resting on Storm's coat. "Almost every night. In the dreams, I'm always screaming, but no one hears me." The vulnerability in her voice struck Emily deeply. She remembered her own nightmares after losing Whisper, the helplessness, the terror, the grief that had stolen her voice for 9 long months. "I understand," she said simply. Amanda looked up, really seeing Emily for the first time. You do, don't you? Uncle Richard told me about what happened to you. About how you stopped talking after your horse died? Emily nodded, surprised that Hargrove had shared her story with his niece. For a long time, I couldn't find the words for what I felt, she acknowledged. Storm helped me remember how to speak again. They stood in shared understanding, two young women connected by similar traumas, with Storm as the bridge between their experiences. After several minutes of quiet connection, Amanda's posture had visibly relaxed. I don't think I'm ready to ride again, she admitted. Not yet. That's perfectly okay, Emily assured her. Healing follows its own timeline. But maybe sometime you'd like to come back and spend more time with Storm. Just like this, no pressure, no expectations. Amanda nodded, a genuine smile lighting her face for the first time. I think I'd like that. As they rejoined the observation group, Hargrove placed a protective arm around his niece's shoulders, his expression a mixture of pride and gratitude. Thank you, he said simply to Emily. Doctor. Klein stepped forward, consulting briefly with the behavior specialists before addressing the assembled group. Based on today's assessment, I believe we have witnessed a complete rehabilitation, she announced. Storm has demonstrated consistent responsiveness, appropriate social behavior, and exceptional tolerance for novel situations. Most importantly, he has shown the specific temperament qualities needed for therapeutic work. A murmur of approval ran through the audience. Emily felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to her eyes. She turned to Storm, who stood beside her with calm dignity, so different from the fearful, aggressive animal she had first encountered. Furthermore, Dr. Klein continued, I am recommending that Eagle Heights establish a specialized trauma recovery program with Storm as our flagship therapy horse. Emily Carter, who has been instrumental in Storm's rehabilitation, will continue as his primary handler and assist in program development. The formal announcement dissolved into excited discussion among the board members and specialists. As people began to disperse, making plans for implementation and funding, Emily found herself suddenly overwhelmed. She led Storm to a quiet corner of the arena, needing a moment to process the emotions surging through her. We did it, she whispered, wrapping her arms around his powerful neck. You did it. Storm lowered his head, resting it gently against her back in what felt remarkably like an embrace. For a long moment, they stood together in silent communion, girl and horse both transformed by their journey together. Emily? Her father's voice broke through her reverie. She turned to find both her parents watching from the arena entrance, their faces shining with pride. Did you see? She asked, unable to contain her excitement as she ran to embrace them. They're creating a whole new program because of Storm. We saw, her mother confirmed, tears glinting in her eyes. Every amazing minute. Her father squeezed her shoulder. A doctor. Klein mentioned they want you involved in the program development. That's quite an opportunity. Emily nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. I have so many ideas, she admitted. Ways to help other trauma survivors, human and equine. As her parents smiled indulgently at her enthusiasm, Emily felt a sense of completion unlike anything she had experienced since before the accident. The circle that had begun with her own healing had expanded to include Storm's transformation, then Michael's recovery, and now, potentially, countless others through the new program. Dr. Winters had been right, she realized. This journey had never been about saving just one horse. It had been about building bridges between fear and courage, between trauma and healing, between isolation and connection. Later that evening, as sunset painted the Montana sky in hues of gold and amber, Emily sat alone with Storm in his paddock. The excitement of the day had given way to a peaceful quiet, the future stretching before them filled with purpose and possibility. I wonder if you know how many lives you're going to change, she mused, leaning against the stallion's warm side as he grazed contentedly beside her. How many people will find their voice because of you, just like I did? Storm raised his head briefly, regarding her with those intelligent dark eyes that had captured her heart months ago at the paddock fence. In his gaze, Emily saw not just the bond they had forged through shared trauma and healing, but a promise of what lay ahead, a future defined not by what they had survived, but by what they could create together. As darkness fell over Eagle Heights Reserve, Emily made her way back to her waiting parents, her step light with the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new connections. The silent girl who had arrived here 6 months ago had found not just her voice, but her calling. And the condemned horse had found not just safety, but purpose. Their story, like their healing, was far from finished. But the hardest chapters were behind them now, the way forward illuminated by the trust they had built between them, a trust that had proven strong enough to transcend boundaries of species, of trauma, of language itself. A trust that would, in time, help others find their way back from the edge of their own silent worlds. 2 years later, the morning sun crested over the eastern ridge of Eagle Heights Reserve, painting the expanded facilities in golden light. Emily Carter stood at the fence of the main therapy arena, watching as the first participants of the day arrived for their sessions. At 22, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her purpose early and pursued it with unwavering dedication. "Morning, Em," Michael called, wheeling himself toward her with practiced ease. Now 17, he had grown several inches taller, his shoulders broader, though his legs remained unnervingly thin beneath his jeans. "Is Storm ready for our advanced session?" Emily smiled at his enthusiasm. "Tacked up and waiting. Marcus wants to see your posting trot today." Michael grinned, a flash of the determined boy she had first met now evident in the young man he was becoming. "We've been practicing. I can maintain it for almost 3 minutes now." "Impressive," Emily acknowledged, genuinely proud of his progress. In the 2 years since Storm's rehabilitation program had officially launched, Michael had advanced from basic therapeutic riding to legitimate equestrian skills, his physical strength and balance improving beyond his doctor's most optimistic projections. As Michael headed toward the preparation area, Emily's gaze swept over the reserve that had become her second home. What had once been a single rehabilitation paddock for Storm had expanded into a comprehensive facility dedicated to trauma recovery, both equine and human. 3 new arenas, specialized sensory trails, and a covered therapy center for winter work had transformed Eagle Heights into a nationally recognized center for innovative equine therapy. And at the heart of it all stood Storm, once deemed too dangerous to live, now the flagship therapy horse whose success had inspired the entire program. "Wool gathering again?" Marcus teased, joining her at the fence. The head trainer had more silver in his hair now, but his eyes remained as sharp and kind as when he had first taken a chance on a silent girl and a condemned horse. Emily laughed, shaking off her momentary retrospection. "Just appreciating how far we've come," she admitted. "Sometimes it still feels surreal." Marcus nodded, understanding. "Speaking of progress, your application packet arrived yesterday." He handed her a thick envelope bearing the University of Colorado letterhead. "Certified mail, very official." Emily took the envelope with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. After 2 years of intensive work at Eagle Heights, balanced with community college courses, she had applied to the university's specialized program in equine-assisted mental health, one of the most competitive in the country. "Have you told your parents yet?" Marcus asked. Emily shook her head, slipping the envelope into her jacket pocket. "I wanted to open it alone first. Whatever the decision, it affects all of us, me, my parents, the program." "Storm," Marcus's expression softened. "Whatever that letter says, you've already accomplished more than most people do in a lifetime," he reminded her. "And there's always a place for you here." Before Emily could respond, a familiar whinny caught her attention. Storm stood at the gate of the therapy arena, his red coat gleaming in the morning light as he watched their conversation with that intelligent focus that still amazed everyone who worked with him. "Your partner's getting impatient," Marcus observed with a smile. "Better not keep him waiting." As Emily crossed to the arena, her hand unconsciously touched the envelope in her pocket. The past 2 years had been a careful balancing act, developing the therapy program at Eagle Heights while pursuing her education, maintaining her crucial bond with Storm while helping him build relationships with other handlers. The university program would take her away from Montana for extended periods, a prospect that filled her with both excitement and anxiety. "Hey, handsome," she greeted Storm, who lowered his head for her customary scratch between his ears. At 12 years old, the stallion was in his prime, his once scarred body now a testament to proper care and nutrition. Only the smallest visible marks remained from his previous abuse, much like the emotional scars Emily herself still carried beneath her confident exterior. "Big day today," she told him, checking his tack for Michael's session. "New participants this afternoon, and Michael's going to show off his posting trot." Storm nudged her shoulder affectionately, seemingly understanding her words as he always did. Their communication had evolved over the years into something that frequently left visitors to the program speechless, a connection that transcended conventional training methods and ventured into something more profound. The morning passed in a productive rhythm, with Michael's session showcasing the remarkable progress possible through consistent therapeutic riding. By early afternoon, Emily had led 3 more sessions with participants ranging from veterans with PTSD to children with developmental challenges. Through it all, Storm performed with the steady reliability that had made him the program's most requested therapy horse. "You've earned a break," Emily told him after the final morning session, loosening his girth and leading him to the quiet paddock reserved for the therapy horse's rest periods. Just 45 minutes, then we have the new group. As Storm grazed contentedly, Emily found a shady spot under a nearby tree and pulled out the university envelope. For several moments, she simply held it, weighing the potential futures it contained. 2 years ago, when Dr. Klein had first suggested she consider formal education in equine therapy, the idea had seemed impossible. Her parents, though supportive, had worried about her readiness to leave the structured environment of Eagle Heights. Emily herself had questioned whether she could bear to be separated from Storm after all they had been through together. But gradually, as the program expanded and her role evolved from Storm's handler to program assistant to junior therapist, Emily had recognized the need for specialized knowledge beyond what she could learn through apprenticeship alone. With Marcus's encouragement and Dr. Winter's continued guidance, she had begun taking courses at the local community college while researching universities with comprehensive equine therapy programs. Now the moment of decision had arrived. Taking a deep breath, Emily opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Her eyes scanned quickly past the formal greeting to the paragraph that would determine her immediate future. We are pleased to offer you admission to the University of Colorado's Equine-Assisted Mental Health Specialist Program with a full scholarship funded by the Hargrove Foundation for Therapeutic Advancement. Emily's breath caught. Not just acceptance, but a full scholarship, funded by Hargrove himself, whose niece Amanda had become a regular visitor to Eagle Heights over the past 2 years, gradually reclaiming her love of horses under Storm's gentle guidance. The program would require her presence in Colorado for intensive 8-week residencies 3 times a year, with the remainder of the coursework conducted remotely. It was the best possible scenario, allowing her to continue her work at Eagle Heights while gaining the specialized education she needed. Across the paddock, Storm raised his head from grazing, his ears pricked forward as if sensing her excitement. Emily smiled through the tears that had begun to well in her eyes. "We did it!" she called to him. "We really did it!" The stallion nickered softly in response, then returned to his grazing with equine practicality. Emily laughed, wiping away tears. Even after all this time, Storm maintained his unique personality, affectionate but pragmatic, sensitive yet remarkably stable. Dr. Santos had once described him as the most emotionally intelligent horse he had ever encountered, a statement that had been quoted in several professional journals documenting the Eagle Heights program's success. What the articles couldn't capture, however, was the depth of the bond between this particular horse and the young woman who had first reached through his fence when everyone else had given up. Emily tucked the acceptance letter back into its envelope, already mentally composing the phone call to her parents. They would be thrilled, she knew, proud of her accomplishment while relieved that the program's structure wouldn't take her away from Montana completely. Her moment of private celebration was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus, accompanied by a nervous-looking family, a woman in her 30s, a man who Emily assumed was her husband, and between them, a small boy of about 7 who seemed to be trying to disappear into his mother's side. "Emily," Marcus called. "Got a minute? I'd like you to meet our new participants." Setting aside the letter, Emily crossed the paddock to join them at the fence. The boy's eyes darted fearfully between the adults, his body language screaming discomfort. "This is Emily Carter, our program coordinator," Marcus introduced her. "Emily, this is the Mitchell family, Rebecca, James, and Ethan." Emily smiled warmly, focusing first on the parents before gently shifting her attention to the boy. "It's nice to meet you all. We're looking forward to working with you, Ethan." The child didn't respond, pressing himself closer to his mother's side. Rebecca Mitchell placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "Ethan doesn't speak," she explained softly. "Not since the accident 6 months ago. His therapist recommended your program." Emily felt a profound sense of déjà vu wash over her. The silent child, the worried parents, the hope that connection with a horse might accomplish what traditional therapy could not. It was her own story repeating itself before her eyes. Kneeling to bring herself to Ethan's eye level, Emily spoke directly to him, her voice gentle but not condescending. "You know, Ethan, when I was 15, I stopped talking too. For 9 whole months." The boy's eyes flickered to her face, a flash of surprise breaking through his withdrawn expression. "It's true," Emily continued. "After something scary happened, words just stopped working for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk, I just couldn't find the way." Ethan studied her with cautious interest now, his body language shifting subtly. "Would you like to meet the horse who helped me find my voice again?" Emily asked, gesturing toward Storm, who had wandered closer to the fence, curious about the newcomers. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan gave a tiny nod, the smallest acknowledgement, but a communication nonetheless. His parents exchanged hopeful glances above his head. "Come on then," Emily said, standing and offering her hand. "His name is Storm, and he knows all about being scared and not knowing how to tell people." To everyone's surprise, Ethan reached out and took Emily's offered hand, allowing her to lead him to the fence where Storm waited. The stallion, with the extraordinary sensitivity that had made him the program's most effective therapy horse, lowered his head gently, keeping his powerful body angled non-threateningly as the small boy approached. "You can touch him if you want," Emily suggested. "Right here on his nose. It's soft like velvet." Ethan hesitated, then extended a trembling hand toward the massive red horse. Storm remained perfectly still, eyes soft, ears forward, the posture of complete attentive acceptance that he had perfected over years of therapy work. The moment the child's small fingers made contact with Storm's muzzle, something shifted in his expression, a flash of wonder breaking through the fear that had imprisoned him for months. Storm blew out a gentle breath that ruffled the boy's hair, earning the ghost of a smile, the first his parents had seen since the accident, judging by their astonished expressions. "He likes you," Emily said simply. "Storm's very particular about people, but he can tell you're special." Ethan continued to stroke the stallion's nose, his body gradually relaxing as the connection deepened. Emily stepped back slightly, giving him space while remaining close enough for security. "Would you like to come into the paddock with me to meet him properly?" she asked. "Your parents can come too, or they can watch from here. Whatever feels comfortable for you." After a moment's consideration, Ethan nodded again, more decisively this time. He looked up at his parents, then pointed to the fence, his meaning clear. They could stay there while he ventured in with Emily. "Are you sure?" his mother asked, anxiety evident in her voice. "He's so big." "Storm is our most experienced therapy horse," Emily assured her, "and I'll be right beside Ethan the entire time." This controlled introduction is an important first step in building trust. With obvious reluctance, the Mitchells agreed, watching nervously as Emily led their silent son into the paddock. Storm remained where he was, allowing Ethan to approach at his own pace, with Emily providing quiet guidance. "Remember how I told you Storm knows about being scared?" Emily said as they drew closer to the stallion. "When he first came to Eagle Heights, he was so frightened that he hurt people who tried to help him. Not because he was mean, but because he didn't know how to say he was afraid." Ethan looked up at her, then back at Storm, clearly processing this information. "Sometimes," Emily continued, "when we're really scared or sad, our bodies forget how to use words. That's what happened to me after my horse died. That's what happened to Storm after people hurt him. And maybe that's what happened to you too." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he reached for Storm again, placing his small hand on the stallion's shoulder. Storm lowered his head to Ethan's level, creating a moment of connection so powerful that Emily heard Rebecca Mitchell stifle a sob from the fence line. For the remainder of the session, Emily guided Ethan through simple interactions, with Storm grooming his neck with a soft brush, leading him a few steps with her help, simply standing in his calming presence. The boy remained silent, but his body language transformed from rigid fear to cautious engagement. As their time drew to a close, Emily knelt beside Ethan once more. "Storm will be here again tomorrow," she told him. "And the day after that. Whenever you're ready to visit him, he'll be waiting. No rush, no pressure." Ethan nodded, a real smile ghosting across his face as he gave Storm a final pat before allowing Emily to lead him back to his parents. "That was remarkable," James Mitchell said, watching his son's relaxed posture with obvious amazement. "We haven't seen him respond to anyone like that since before the accident." Emily smiled, recognizing the fragile hope in their eyes, the same hope her own parents had nurtured during her months of silence. "This is just the beginning," she assured them. "The connection between humans and horses creates a unique space for healing. Storm has helped many children find their way back from silence." As the Mitchell family departed for their intake meeting with Dr. Klein, Emily returned to Storm, who had resumed grazing as if facilitating emotional breakthroughs was all in a day's work. "Full circle," she murmured, stroking his gleaming neck. "You and me and another silent child." Storm nudged her gently, his dark eyes seemingly understanding the significance of what had just transpired. Emily rested her forehead against his, overwhelmed by the convergence of past and present, of endings and beginnings. The acceptance letter in her pocket represented her future expanding beyond Eagle Heights, while Ethan's session highlighted the profound impact of the work they had pioneered here. Both were possible because of the extraordinary horse who had once been deemed too dangerous to save, and the girl who had refused to accept that judgment. Later that evening, as sunset painted the Montana sky in familiar hues of gold and crimson, Emily sat with her parents on the observation deck overlooking the reserve. Her father's arm rested around her shoulders. Her mother's hand clasped hers as they absorbed the news of her acceptance and scholarship. "I'm so proud of you," her mother said, emotion making her voice tremble. "Not just for the scholarship, but for everything you've built here." Her father nodded agreement. "From that first day when you broke your silence at Storm's fence, I knew something extraordinary was happening, but I never imagined all this." He gestured toward the expanded facility below, where the evening therapy sessions were concluding. Emily followed his gaze, taking in the scene she sometimes took for granted now. Participants grooming therapy horses, staff members guiding interactions, volunteers maintaining equipment. At the center of it all, Storm stood patiently as a teenage girl in leg braces practiced mounting exercises. "I couldn't have done it without your support," Emily acknowledged. "All those drives from Billings, all those hotel stays until we finally moved closer. You changed your whole lives for this." "For you," her mother corrected gently. "And it was worth every mile, every sacrifice. Watching you heal, watching you find your purpose." She squeezed Emily's hand. "What parent wouldn't move mountains for that?" As darkness fell over Eagle Heights Reserve, Emily made her final rounds, checking on the therapy horses and securing the facilities for the night. Storm had already been returned to his special paddock, larger than the others, with a clear view of the mountains he seemed to enjoy. "Good night, handsome," she murmured, pausing at his fence for their nightly ritual. The stallion approached, lowering his head for her to press her forehead against his in the gesture of connection that had become their signature over the years. In the quiet darkness, Emily reflected on the day's convergence of endings and beginnings. The acceptance letter represented a new chapter in her professional journey, while Ethan's session had powerfully reminded her of her own starting point. The silent child she had once been would never have imagined standing here, preparing to pursue advanced education while helping others find their voices through the same connection that had saved her. "We came a long way, didn't we?" she whispered to Storm, who nudged her gently in response. "From that first day when everyone thought you were too dangerous to save." Storm's intelligent dark eyes seemed to hold understanding far beyond what anyone might expect from a horse. In those eyes, Emily still saw the reflection of her own healing journey, the shared trauma that had connected them, the mutual trust that had transformed them both. Dr. Winters had once told her that true healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about learning to carry it differently. Looking at Storm now, strong, confident, purposeful, Emily understood that wisdom more deeply than ever. The scars of their respective traumas remained, visible in moments of sudden tension or instinctive fear, but they no longer defined who they were or what they could become. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Ethan's continued therapy, preparations for her university program, the expansion of Eagle Heights services. But tonight, in this moment of quiet connection with the horse who had changed everything, Emily felt a profound sense of completion. The story that had begun in silence and fear had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined. A testament to the healing power of connection, to the resilience of wounded souls, to the possibility of transformation when just one person refuses to give up. As Emily finally turned to leave, Storm whinnied softly after her, a sound that still sometimes caught her by surprise with its emotional resonance. She paused, looking back at the magnificent red stallion silhouetted against the Montana night sky. "I know," she said softly. "I'll see you tomorrow." And she would, just as she had every day since that first moment at the paddock fence, when a silent girl and a condemned horse had recognized in each other the possibility of redemption. Their journey together had never been about a destination, but about the path itself. The countless small moments of connection that had gradually built a bridge from trauma to healing, from silence to voice, from isolation to purpose. As Emily walked toward the parking lot where her parents waited, her steps were light with the knowledge that while some chapters might be ending, their story itself continued to unfold, touching other lives, creating new possibilities, expanding beyond what anyone had thought possible. The silent girl had found her voice. The dangerous horse had found his purpose. And in their unlikely bond, countless others were finding their way back from the edge of their own silent worlds. It was, in every sense, a journey come full circle.